Imagine discovering that every disturbing sound you've dismissed as normal city noise was actually someone's final moments being broadcast to thousands of paying viewers on the dark web. The thing about living in a converted warehouse in East London is that you get used to strange noises. Industrial buildings weren't designed for residential living, so sounds carry in odd ways through the concrete and steel. For 2 years, I thought the sounds coming from the flat below mine were just part of urban life. Deliveries, renovations, the occasional late-night party. Now I know better, and in approximately 18 hours, I'm going to become the star of the same dark web broadcasts I've been unknowingly listening to through my floorboards. I moved into my flat in Hackney Wick after university, when the area was still affordable for someone working entry-level jobs in marketing. The building used to be a textile factory, converted into a dozen small flats with thin walls and thinner floors. Most of my neighbors were artists, freelancers, or young professionals like me who couldn't afford anywhere better. The kind of transient community where people keep to themselves and mind their own business. The flat directly below mine was occupied by someone I rarely saw. Occasionally, I'd glimpse a middle-aged man in the communal entrance, always carrying heavy bags or equipment cases. He kept odd hours and seemed to have frequent visitors, but in a building full of creative types working irregular schedules, that wasn't unusual. I knew him only as the name on the buzzer, M. Patterson. The first time I noticed something strange was about 6 months after moving in. I was working late on my laptop when I heard what sounded like someone crying through the floor. Not ordinary crying. Desperate, terrified sobbing that lasted for several minutes before stopping abruptly. I assumed it was an argument between Patterson and a partner, the kind of domestic situation you pretend not to hear in shared buildings. Over the following weeks, similar sounds occurred regularly. Always late at night, always brief, always stopping suddenly. Sometimes crying, sometimes what sounded like pleading or distressed conversation. The sounds were muffled by the concrete floor, but clear enough to be disturbing. I considered complaining to the building management, but wasn't sure how to explain what I was hearing without sounding like I was spying on my neighbor. The noises gradually became more frequent and more varied. Heavy objects being moved around, electronic equipment humming constantly, what sounded like construction work happening at strange hours. Patterson seemed to have an unusual number of visitors, always arriving and leaving at night, always carrying equipment or large bags. One evening, I was coming home from work when I encountered Patterson in the stairwell. He was directing 2 other men who were carrying what appeared to be professional camera equipment up to his flat. When he saw me, he explained that he was a freelance videographer working on corporate training materials that required controlled lighting conditions. The explanation seemed reasonable, and it accounted for the equipment noises I'd been hearing. But the sounds that followed weren't consistent with normal video production. Instead of the steady hum of lights and cameras, I heard intermittent activity that suggested something more irregular was happening. Periods of intense activity followed by long silences. Sounds that suggested distress or conflict rather than professional filming. About a month later, I discovered what appeared to be the first concrete evidence of something wrong. I was taking rubbish to the communal bins when I found several items that had clearly come from Patterson's flat. Medical supplies, plastic sheeting, and cleaning products that seemed excessive for normal household use. The combination was disturbing, particularly given the sounds I'd been hearing. I started paying closer attention to the patterns of activity below. The sounds seemed to follow a schedule. Preparation phases involving equipment setup, periods of intense activity that included the distressing human sounds, followed by cleanup periods that often lasted until dawn. The pattern repeated roughly once a week, always at night, always following the same sequence. One night, curiosity got the better of me. During what sounded like a preparation phase, I went down to the communal garden behind the building and looked up at Patterson's windows. They were covered with blackout material, but I could see the edges of bright lighting equipment around the frames. What disturbed me more was seeing cables running from his windows to a small satellite dish I hadn't noticed before. The next morning, I found Patterson in the communal entrance and casually asked about his video work. He was more forthcoming than I expected, explaining that he specialized in niche content for international clients. He mentioned working with subjects who required discretion and privacy, hence the soundproofing and security measures he'd installed. He also mentioned that his work required high-speed internet connections and specialized broadcasting equipment. When I asked about the satellite dish, Patterson explained that his clients demanded secure, encrypted transmission methods that standard internet connections couldn't provide. He said he used dark web protocols to ensure client confidentiality and protect the privacy of his subjects. The explanation sounded professional, but something about his manner suggested he was being deliberately vague. Over the following days, I researched dark web broadcasting and discovered information about red rooms, allegedly live-streamed torture or murder where viewers could pay to watch or influence events. Most sources insisted they were urban legends, but some suggested they might exist using sophisticated encryption and cryptocurrency payment systems to avoid detection. The timing coincided with an escalation in the sounds from Patterson's flat. The preparation phases became longer and more complex. The periods of distress became more intense and extended. The cleanup phases seemed to involve more thorough work, including what sounded like industrial cleaning equipment. I also noticed changes in the building's internet connectivity. During Patterson's active periods, the shared Wi-Fi became unreliable, suggesting he was using substantial bandwidth for upload activity. When I mentioned this to other residents, they confirmed experiencing similar issues, always at night, always coinciding with increased activity from Patterson's flat. 2 weeks ago, everything changed. I was lying in bed around midnight when I heard sounds that were unmistakably different from the usual pattern. Instead of the typical preparation noises, I heard what sounded like a struggle, followed by someone calling for help in a voice that carried clearly through the floor. The sound suggested someone was in immediate danger. I called the police, reporting a possible domestic violence situation. They arrived within minutes and spoke to Patterson, who calmly explained that he was editing audio for a documentary about crime victims. He showed them his professional equipment and credentials and played samples of the audio he claimed to be working with. The officers seemed satisfied and left without further investigation. But Patterson knew I had called them. The next morning, I found a note pushed under my door, thanking me for my concern about the previous night's work. He explained that his documentary work sometimes involved distressing content that could be misinterpreted by neighbors. He assured me that everything was legitimate and suggested that we should discuss his work schedule to avoid future misunderstandings. When I met with Patterson that evening, he was surprisingly open about his activities. He explained that he produced specialized content for clients who paid premium rates for authentic, unscripted material. He said his work involved creating realistic scenarios that appeared genuine to viewers who were willing to pay substantial amounts for convincing performances. Patterson showed me some of his equipment, professional cameras, sophisticated lighting systems, and computer servers that he said were necessary for secure broadcasting to international clients. He explained that his subjects were paid performers who specialized in creating convincing distress reactions for discerning audiences who could distinguish between authentic and simulated content. The explanation addressed many of my concerns, but something still felt wrong. The sounds I heard didn't seem like performances. They carried an authenticity that suggested genuine fear and pain. When I mentioned this, Patterson explained that the most successful performers were those who could create truly convincing reactions, and that his clients paid premium rates specifically for content that seemed completely real. He also explained the dark web broadcasting setup, showing me how encrypted protocols and cryptocurrency payments allowed him to serve clients worldwide while maintaining their anonymity and his own security. He said this level of discretion was necessary because his content pushed boundaries that mainstream platforms wouldn't accept. Patterson concluded our conversation by mentioning that he was always looking for new performers who could create authentic reactions. He said the work paid extremely well for people who could handle intense scenarios convincingly. He suggested that if I was ever interested in supplementing my marketing income, he could arrange an audition. I declined, but Patterson's offer stayed with me. The marketing work wasn't paying enough to cover rising London rents, and the money he mentioned was substantial. Over the following days, I found myself considering his proposition, particularly when I heard what sounded like another successful session from his flat. Last week, I finally agreed to meet with Patterson about potential work. He explained that his current project involved creating content for a very specific audience that paid extraordinary amounts for authentic-seeming material. He said new performers typically started with minor roles to build comfort and confidence before progressing to more intensive scenarios. Patterson showed me the contracts his performers signed, which included substantial payment terms, confidentiality clauses, and detailed consent agreements. Everything appeared professional and legitimate. He explained that the intense reactions I'd been hearing were the result of method acting techniques that helped performers create convincing distress responses. He offered me what he called a trial role, a simple scenario that would pay enough to cover several months of rent. The work would involve a few hours of filming, following a script designed to create authentic-seeming reactions for his discerning clientele. He assured me that everything was performance, that safety protocols were in place, and that I could withdraw at any time if I became uncomfortable. I agreed to the trial, scheduled for tomorrow night. Patterson explained that the session would be broadcast to his regular audience, who had been informed about the new performer and were particularly interested in authentic reactions from first-time participants. He said the audience engagement was part of what made his content valuable. Viewers felt they were witnessing genuine experiences rather than obvious performances. But yesterday, I made a discovery that changed everything. While Patterson was out, I managed to access the building's Wi-Fi router and examine the network traffic from his flat. The data streams were massive, far larger than normal video files, and were being transmitted to multiple dark web addresses simultaneously. More disturbing was what I found when I managed to access one of these addresses through a Tor browser. Instead of the professional performance content Patterson had described, I found myself looking at what was clearly a red room operation. Live streams of genuine torture and murder, with chat functions allowing viewers to request specific actions through cryptocurrency payments. The archives showed dozens of previous broadcasts, all apparently filmed in Patterson's flat, all featuring people who displayed genuine terror and pain rather than convincing acting. These weren't performances, they were real victims, and I had been listening to their final moments through my floorboards for months. I realized that Patterson's offer wasn't for acting work. Tomorrow night's trial role was scheduled to be my final performance, broadcast live to thousands of dark web viewers who were expecting to watch someone die in the flat below mine. I've been hiding in a hotel since making this discovery, but Patterson keeps finding ways to contact me. Messages on social media, emails to accounts he shouldn't know about, even notes left at my workplace, all reminding me about tomorrow's commitment and explaining that his audience has been told to expect a new performer with authentic reactions. This morning, I found a package at my hotel room containing a tablet computer. When I turned it on, it showed a live feed of my empty flat, apparently filmed from Patterson's unit below. Text on the screen explained that the audience was already gathering for tomorrow's broadcast and that my non-appearance would disappoint viewers who had paid premium rates for the session. The message also included details about my daily routines, my workplace, my family's addresses, information that made it clear they had been monitoring me far longer than I realized. The final line explained that tomorrow's broadcast would happen regardless of my cooperation. The only question was whether I would be conscious for it. I'm writing this from another hotel, but I know they'll find me again. Patterson's operation is too sophisticated, too well-resourced, too experienced at managing unwilling participants. I've heard too many of their victims through my floorboards to believe I can escape the same fate. Tomorrow night, thousands of people on the dark web will watch a live stream from the flat below mine. They've paid in cryptocurrency to see authentic reactions from someone who doesn't know what's really happening until it's too late. They've been promised genuine terror and pain rather than acted performances. The most horrifying realization is that I've been living above a dark web red room for over a year, listening to people die while assuming they were just neighbors arguing or filming amateur videos. I've been an unwitting witness to dozens of murders, dismissing genuine cries for help as domestic disputes or creative projects. How many other people might be living above or next to similar operations? How many strange noises do we ignore because we don't want to get involved? How many victims have called for help through thin walls and floors, only to have neighbors assume it's just part of urban living? The dark web has made it possible for these operations to exist anywhere, hidden in plain sight, broadcasting horror to paying audiences, while neighbors remain oblivious to what's happening around them. The technology makes it easy to hide, to pay anonymously, to consume murder as entertainment. I should have trusted my instincts about those sounds, should have called police sooner, should have investigated more thoroughly instead of minding my own business. Should have realized that genuine distress sounds different from acting or arguments. But it's too late for should-haves now. Tomorrow night, I'll probably become another voice crying through floorboards that someone else will dismiss as just neighborhood noise. Whether I show up willingly or they come to collect me, tomorrow's broadcast will feature the neighbor who lived upstairs and listened to all the previous victims without understanding what he was hearing. And somewhere above us, another neighbor will probably assume my screams are just someone having a bad night. I didn't recognize my reflection when I first saw it. Not immediately. It took a few seconds of staring at the screen before I realized I was looking at my own face, slightly distorted by the camera angle, but unmistakably me. My living room was behind me, dimly lit by the lamp I'd left on earlier. The image was grainy, but clear enough. What wasn't clear was how this live stream existed at all. Let me back up. I'm a cybersecurity consultant, not one of those high-level experts who protects government networks or counters state-sponsored hackers. My work involves helping small businesses implement basic security protocols, conducting vulnerability assessments for local companies, and occasionally assisting with data recovery. It's honest work that pays the bills, but it's rarely exciting. 3 weeks ago, a new client contacted me, a mental health clinic concerned about patient confidentiality after several employees reported strange network behaviors. When I arrived at their office, the clinic director explained their concerns with obvious discomfort. Several therapists had noticed their session recordings being accessed at odd hours, despite the files supposedly being secured in an encrypted system. Nothing had been stolen or altered as far as anyone could tell, but the access logs showed viewing activity during overnight hours when no staff should have been working. My initial assessment revealed a surprisingly sophisticated breach. Someone had created a backdoor into their network that bypassed standard security measures. This wasn't the work of an opportunistic hacker or disgruntled employee with basic skills. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. I isolated the compromised systems, implemented temporary security measures, and began the deeper forensic work of tracking the intrusion to its source. The digital trail led me through multiple proxy servers and anonymous networks. Whoever had accessed the clinic's files had taken elaborate precautions to hide their tracks. After days of careful analysis, I managed to identify a pattern in the connection timestamps. The access always occurred between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., always on Tuesdays and Fridays, and always targeted the same subset of patient files: recordings of therapy sessions dealing with trauma, abuse, or severe anxiety disorders. My report to the clinic detailed the technical aspects of the breach and recommended comprehensive security upgrades. What I didn't include was my growing suspicion about the nature of the intrusion. This wasn't typical cybercrime seeking financial data or identity information. This was targeted surveillance of people's most vulnerable moments. The precision and pattern suggested something beyond simple data theft. Professional ethics dictated that I should complete my contract, submit my findings, and move on to the next client. But something about this case gnawed at me. The deliberate targeting of trauma patients felt predatory in a way that cybercrime rarely does. Most hackers I've encountered are motivated by financial gain or technical challenge, not the systematic observation of human suffering. After completing my official work for the clinic, I continued tracking the intrusion pattern on my own time. Using a secured system isolated from my personal network, I created digital breadcrumbs designed to attract the attention of whoever had breached the clinic's security. I set up dummy files mimicking the naming conventions of therapy recordings, embedded with unique markers that would help me trace anyone who accessed them. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Then on a Tuesday night, my monitoring system alerted me to activity. Someone had taken the bait, accessing my dummy files through the same sophisticated methods used on the clinic's network. This time, I was prepared. As they downloaded my files, I deployed a specialized tracking script designed to pierce through proxy defenses and reveal connection origins. What I found led me to a series of encrypted channels on the dark web. Using anonymous browsing tools, I followed the digital trail to a nondescript forum that required Bitcoin payment for access. The page was minimalist, black background, simple text navigation, no graphics or branding. The site called itself The Witness Room and claimed to offer authentic moments of human vulnerability for discerning observers. I paid the entry fee using an anonymous cryptocurrency wallet and gained basic access to the forum. The site was organized into categories with clinical-sounding names: trauma responses, grief manifestations, anxiety episodes, confessional moments. Each category contained dozens of live streams and recorded videos. The view counts were low, usually under 50, but the payment required for each viewing was substantial. The first video I accessed showed a therapy session similar to those from the clinic. A person describing a traumatic experience to an off-camera therapist, unaware they were being observed by paying strangers on the internet. Other videos showed people alone in bedrooms or living spaces, experiencing panic attacks, crying, or engaging in compulsive behaviors. All appeared to be recorded without the subject's knowledge. The site's premium section required additional payment and verification. After another cryptocurrency transfer and a waiting period of 24 hours, I gained access to this restricted area. Here, the content was categorized differently: direct engagement, controlled scenarios, live requests. The first live stream I accessed in this section showed an empty room with white walls and a single chair. Text on screen indicated that the broadcast would begin in 17 minutes and that scenario parameters had already been established by primary observers. A chat window showed usernames discussing technical aspects of the upcoming stream: camera angles, lighting requirements, audio quality. The clinical detachment of their conversation struck me as more disturbing than explicit anticipation would have been. I didn't stay to watch whatever was scheduled to occur in that room. Instead, I methodically documented the site structure, user patterns, and technical infrastructure. The operation was sophisticated, with multiple layers of security and anonymization. This wasn't some amateur effort. It had the hallmarks of an organized network with significant resources. After gathering sufficient information, I prepared a detailed report for federal law enforcement. I included everything I had discovered about the witness room, its connection to the clinic breach, and my analysis of how the operation functioned technically. I submitted the report through official channels, expecting to be contacted for follow-up information. A week passed with no response. I sent a follow-up inquiry and received an automated acknowledgement, but nothing substantive. After 10 days, I called the field office directly and was told my report had been received and forwarded to the appropriate department. The agent I spoke with seemed disinterested, almost dismissive. Frustrated by the lack of official response, I intensified my own investigation. I created a more comprehensive mapping of the witness room's network infrastructure, identifying potential server locations and administrative access points. I catalogued user patterns, payment flows, and content distribution methods. Each layer I uncovered revealed greater complexity and more disturbing implications. The live streams weren't just recordings of therapy sessions or private moments captured through compromised security systems. Some appeared to be deliberately staged scenarios where individuals were placed in situations designed to trigger emotional responses. The controllers would manipulate environmental factors, sounds, temperature, lighting, while observers in the chat suggested specific triggers to elicit desired reactions. 3 weeks into my investigation, I discovered something that fundamentally changed my understanding of what I was dealing with. Hidden in the site's technical architecture was a secondary network, a parallel system that monitored the observers themselves. Every user of the witness room was being recorded while they watched. Keystrokes logged, webcams quietly activated, microphones capturing ambient sounds. The watchers were also being watched. This discovery led me to a deeper level of the operation, accessed through a different entry point entirely. Here, the content consisted entirely of recordings of people watching the witness room streams, close-up footage of faces as they observed others suffering, metadata tracking their viewing patterns, physiological responses measured through subtle analysis of facial movements and breathing patterns. This meta-observation had its own audience, paying even higher premiums for access. I was documenting this secondary system when I noticed something odd about one of the observer recordings. The timestamp showed it was from the previous night, during hours when I had been accessing the witness room myself. With growing unease, I opened the file. The video showed a man sitting at a desk, illuminated by the blue glow of a computer monitor. The camera angle suggested a webcam perspective, looking slightly down at the subject. His face showed subtle expressions of concentration, occasional discomfort, and clinical interest. It took me several seconds to recognize my own reflection, captured from my laptop's camera, that I thought had been securely disabled. The video continued for over an hour, showing me methodically investigating the witness room, taking notes, examining different streams. Occasional metadata appeared on screen. My heart rate estimated through facial blood flow analysis, my pupil dilation tracked when viewing disturbing content, timestamps correlating my viewing patterns with specific website areas. Everything I had done to investigate them had provided them with content for their meta-observation network. I immediately shut down my system, disconnected from all networks, and physically removed the camera and microphones from my devices. I swept my apartment for hidden surveillance devices, finding nothing obvious but remaining unconvinced. The realization that I had become content for the very system I was investigating created a nauseating feedback loop of paranoia. That night, I carefully constructed a new secure system using components that had never been connected to my home network. I used this to draft detailed reports for multiple law enforcement agencies, journalistic organizations, and cybersecurity threat centers. I included all my evidence, analysis, and personal observations, sending each report through different anonymous channels. 2 days later, I received an email to my personal account, the one I had not used for any part of this investigation. The subject line contained only a timestamp matching exactly when I had sent my reports. The body of the email was empty, but attached was a video file. Against all better judgment, I opened it on an isolated device. The video showed my apartment from multiple angles, views from devices that should not have existed, my television, computer monitor, phone screen, even my refrigerator with its smart display. All showed the same image. Me sitting at my desk, drafting reports about the witness room. The footage zoomed in on my face, analyzing my expressions as I worked. Text appeared on screen. Subject demonstrates obsessive behavior patterns consistent with trauma response category 4B. Continued observation recommended. I abandoned my apartment that night, taking nothing electronic with me. I checked into a hotel using cash, bought a disposable phone, and contacted the few people I truly trusted. One friend in law enforcement agreed to meet me the following day. She arrived at our meeting location visibly uncomfortable. When I began explaining my findings about the witness room, she stopped me mid-sentence. Her department had received my report, she confirmed, but it had been flagged and reclassified almost immediately. She wasn't authorized to discuss the details, but her message was clear. Powerful interests were involved, and pursuing this further would have consequences. I spent the next week moving between hotels, using public computers to monitor for any signs that my reports had generated action. Nothing appeared in news outlets or public records. No investigations were announced. The witness room continued operating without disruption. 10 days after leaving my apartment, I received a text on my disposable phone, a phone whose number I had shared with exactly 3 people. The message contained only a website address. Against every rational instinct, I accessed it from a public computer. The page showed a live stream of the hotel room I had checked into that morning. The bed was empty, the room unoccupied. I was sitting in the hotel lobby as I viewed the stream. A timer in the corner showed the broadcast had been active for 3 hours. The view count displayed the number 7. The stream title was simply my full name followed by Observation Phase 2. That was yesterday. I've since crossed state lines, abandoned all electronic devices, and withdrawn cash to live on while I consider my options. I'm writing this account by hand, planning to have it typed and distributed by someone with no connection to me or this situation. I don't know exactly what the witness room is or who operates it. The technical sophistication suggests resources beyond typical criminal organizations. The apparent immunity from law enforcement implies protection or participation at institutional levels. The methodical nature of their observation network indicates purpose beyond voyeurism or profit. What I do know is that somewhere, right now, someone is watching a live stream of a person who doesn't know they're being observed. Someone is paying to witness another human being's vulnerable moments. Someone is analyzing reactions, cataloging responses, building profiles of both the observed and the observers. And increasingly, I suspect that the true purpose of the witness room isn't the content it provides to its users. The real product is the understanding of human psychology that comes from watching people watch others. The multi-layered observation that reveals patterns of behavior, predictors of response, blueprints of manipulation. I check for cameras everywhere now, not just obvious devices, but any object that could potentially house monitoring equipment. I vary my routines, change my appearance, avoid patterns. Still, I feel watched, not by supernatural forces or paranoid delusion, but by a system designed specifically to observe people like me, people who have glimpsed something they weren't meant to see, whose reactions to that glimpse are themselves valuable data. Tonight I'll move again, find another anonymous place to sleep. But before I do, I'll look directly into the nearest screen, television, traffic camera, ATM interface, it doesn't matter which, and I'll acknowledge the observers I know are there, not with fear or defiance, but with the calm recognition that in a world where vulnerable moments can be commodified, the most vulnerable moment of all is the one where you realize you've always been in someone's blind spot, always been visible to eyes you never knew were watching. I thought I was doing something good. That's what makes this whole situation so much worse. 6 months ago, I was just someone trying to make the internet a safer place. Now, I'm hiding in a Premier Inn somewhere in the Midlands, knowing that tomorrow night, thousands of people will tune in to watch me become the star of my own nightmare. It started when I applied for a job as a content moderator with a company called SafeNet Solutions. They advertise themselves as specialists in keeping harmful content off social media platforms. The work seemed meaningful, protecting children from inappropriate material, removing violent content, flagging harassment. The kind of job where you could feel like you were making a difference. I'd been unemployed for nearly 8 months after my last position was made redundant, living in a shared house in Birmingham with people half my age, watching my savings dwindle while sending off countless applications. When SafeNet offered me the position working from home with decent pay, I jumped at it without asking too many questions. The training was straightforward. They gave me access to their proprietary software that would queue up flagged content for review, videos, images, live streams, all reported by automated systems or other users as potentially violating community guidelines. My job was to watch each piece of content and make a decision. Remove it, leave it up, or escalate it to a senior moderator. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect. Spam, harassment, people posting copyrighted material, the occasional violent video or inappropriate image involving children, which would get immediately escalated and removed. The work was emotionally draining. You see humanity at its worst when you're cleaning up after it. But it felt necessary. I worked remotely, reviewing content for 8 hours a day from my bedroom. The company provided the computer and software, along with strict guidelines about confidentiality. We weren't allowed to discuss our work with anyone outside the company, ostensibly to protect user privacy and prevent people from gaming the moderation system. About 2 months into the job, I started noticing patterns in some of the content that came through my queue. Videos that looked like they were filmed in similar locations, industrial settings with concrete walls and minimal furnishing. The content itself wasn't explicitly violating guidelines, but something about it felt off. Empty rooms with strange equipment, brief clips of preparations for something unclear. When I flagged these for escalation, asking for guidance on whether they violated guidelines, my supervisor would respond that they'd been reviewed and deemed acceptable. I was told to stop wasting time on borderline cases and focus on clear violations. The message was clear: approve these and move on. I tried to push back, suggesting that these videos might be connected to something harmful, but I was reminded that I was new and still in my probationary period. SafeNet had strict policies about overreach. Moderators who flagged too much borderline content would be let go for inefficiency. I needed the job, so I started approving the strange videos without comment. Then I began noticing something else. Some of the videos had embedded metadata that my software could read, but that wouldn't be visible to normal users. Location data, timestamps, user identifiers. I shouldn't have been able to see this information. It suggested my moderation software had deeper access to these platforms than a normal content reviewer would need. One evening, while reviewing a particularly odd video of an empty room with metal restraints visible in the background, I noticed that the metadata showed it was being live-streamed to thousands of viewers simultaneously. This wasn't a recorded video that someone had uploaded. It was happening live. And yet, it was coming through my queue as if it were standard user-generated content awaiting moderation. That's when I realized I wasn't moderating content that had already been posted. I was pre-approving content that was about to be streamed live. My approval was what allowed these broadcasts to go public. I started paying closer attention to the content coming through my queue. Mixed in with normal reported posts were these live feeds from empty rooms, industrial settings, medical equipment, restraints, each one tagged with metadata showing thousands of waiting viewers, and each one requiring my approval before it could broadcast. I was essentially the gatekeeper for what I was beginning to suspect were preparation streams for red rooms. I tried to refuse approval for one of these feeds, marking it as violating guidelines for depicting implements that could be used for harm. Within an hour, I received a call from my supervisor. They reminded me that I was still in my probationary period and that my approval rates had been flagged as concerning. Too many rejections could result in immediate termination. But they also said something that chilled me. They mentioned that they had my address, my banking details, my emergency contacts. Standard information for any employer, of course. But the way they referenced it felt like a veiled threat, like they wanted me to know how easy it would be to find me if I became a problem. I kept approving the feeds. What choice did I have? I needed the work, and I convinced myself that maybe I was wrong about what I was seeing. Maybe these were just art projects or horror film sets. Maybe the viewer counts were inflated. Maybe I was letting the stress of the job make me paranoid. 3 weeks ago, everything changed. A new type of content started coming through my queue. Not just empty rooms anymore, but rooms with people in them. People who looked unconscious or restrained. People who weren't acting. People who looked genuinely terrified when they were conscious. The metadata on these streams showed viewer counts in the tens of thousands. Chat functions that were active with comments I couldn't read, but that seemed to be taking requests or making suggestions. Payment information showing cryptocurrency transactions happening in real time. I couldn't approve them. I just couldn't. I started marking them all as violations, knowing it would flag my performance, but unable to live with myself if I didn't. For 3 days, I rejected every single one of these streams that came through my queue. On the 4th day, I received another package at my house. I hadn't ordered anything, and there was no delivery note. Inside was a tablet computer that automatically connected to a network when I turned it on. The screen showed a live feed of my own bedroom, taken from the camera on the work computer SafeNet had provided. I was looking at myself looking at the tablet. A message appeared on the tablet screen. You've been very thorough in your moderating work. Time for a performance review. Below it was a link to another stream, one showing an empty room with a metal table in the center. In the corner of the screen was a viewer counter, already showing thousands of people waiting, and a countdown timer set for 2 weeks from that day. I packed immediately and left Birmingham that night. I've been moving around England since then, staying in different hotels, buying train tickets with cash, avoiding CCTV when possible. But they keep finding me. Notes left in hotel rooms, messages sent to new phone numbers I've bought, photos of me taken in public places that get sent to whatever device I'm using. The most disturbing realization is that SafeNet Solutions isn't what I thought it was. It's not a company fighting against harmful content. It's a company facilitating it. They use legitimate content moderation as cover for something much darker. The majority of moderators probably are genuine, reviewing normal social media posts. But some of us, selected for particular reasons, were unknowingly gatekeeping for red room broadcasts. I think about how many streams I approved over those 4 months. How many people were harmed because I clicked approve on their preparatory footage. How many victims suffered because I was too concerned about keeping my job to ask harder questions about what I was really moderating. Last week, I tried going to the police in 3 different cities. The evidence I have is circumstantial. Screenshots, metadata, the tablet they sent me. But when I tried to describe the situation, it sounds like the paranoid delusions of someone who spent too much time looking at disturbing content. They take reports, but I can tell they think I'm either lying or having a mental health crisis. The countdown on the tablet now shows less than 2 days remaining. The viewer count has grown to tens of thousands. I've started receiving more specific messages about when and where I need to be. An address in Liverpool, a time, consequences for my family if I don't comply. And they've proven they know exactly where my sister lives, where my elderly parents shop, which route my niece takes to school. I've come to understand that the entire system is designed to implicate people who work for them. Every piece of content I approved created a digital trail connecting me to these broadcasts. Every rejection I made after discovering the truth could be used as evidence that I knew what was happening, but participated anyway. I'm not just a target now. I'm a liability who knows too much about their operation. The most terrifying part is realizing how vast this network must be. How many other content moderation companies might be fronts for similar operations? How many people think they're doing honest work cleaning up the internet when they're actually facilitating its darkest corners? I keep wondering if any of my colleagues at SafeNet knew what we were really doing. Were some of them complicit from the beginning? Were others like me, gradually drawn into something they didn't understand until it was too late? Or am I the only one who stumbled across this particular stream of content? The tablet just chimed with a new notification. The message is simple. Final preparations complete. Transport details being sent to your current location. I'm in a service station cafe somewhere between Leicester and Nottingham, trying to disappear into the crowd, but somehow they still know exactly where I am. I'm going to post this and then ditch the tablet somewhere. Maybe throw it in a bin, maybe leave it on the train. I don't know if it will make any difference. I don't know if anyone will believe this account, or if they'll dismiss it as the ramblings of someone who's lost touch with reality. But if you're working in content moderation, especially for smaller companies or remote positions, pay attention to what you're really approving. Ask questions about the metadata you can access. Notice patterns in the content. And if something feels wrong, trust that instinct even if it cost you the job. I thought I was making the internet safer. Instead, I was helping to make it infinitely more dangerous for the most vulnerable people. Every approval was another step toward this moment, when I become the content instead of the moderator. The countdown shows approximately 30 hours remaining. Thousands of people are waiting to watch what happens next. And somewhere in Liverpool, a room is being prepared for tomorrow night's broadcast. I should have asked more questions from the beginning. Should have trusted my instincts about those first strange videos. Should have realized that a job that seemed too good to be true probably was. But it's too late for should-haves now. The only thing left is to run and hope that somehow I can break free from a system I helped maintain, without ever understanding what it really was. The irony isn't lost on me. I spent months deciding what content was safe for public consumption. Now thousands of people are waiting to consume content featuring me. The moderator has become the moderated. The first thing you should know is that my family has always been careful. Our father worked in data security for 30 years, so internet safety wasn't just casual advice in our household, it was doctrine. We used VPNs before most people knew what they were. We covered webcams with tape. We treated public Wi-Fi like contaminated water. We weren't paranoid, just realistic about digital vulnerabilities. Growing up this way, I learned to navigate online spaces with caution, even if I never fully understood the technical details behind our family protocols. That's what makes everything that happened so ironic. It wasn't me who ventured into dangerous digital territory. It was my sister Mia, the careful one, the one who majored in cybersecurity before switching to journalism. Mia, who lectured me about password hygiene and regularly sent me articles about privacy breaches. Mia, who disappeared exactly 72 hours after telling me she had found something that would change how people understand the internet. The police found nothing useful. Her apartment was undisturbed, almost suspiciously so. Bed made, dishes washed, everything in perfect order. Her phone sat on her nightstand, deliberately powered off, rather than dead. Her laptop was gone. Security footage showed her entering her building on Tuesday evening, face obscured by her usual baseball cap, worn specifically to avoid facial recognition. No footage showed her leaving. By Friday morning, when she missed our weekly coffee meetup, I knew something was wrong. By Friday afternoon, when she missed her call with our parents, we all did. The weeks following her disappearance became a blur of police interviews, searching her apartment repeatedly, putting up flyers, and creating social media campaigns. The detective assigned to her case was sympathetic, but overwhelmed with other cases. After the first month, the updates became less frequent, the leads non-existent. By March, it felt like we were the only ones still actively looking. That's when I decided to examine her work more closely. Mia had been investigating technology-related stories for the past year. Data privacy concerns, corporate surveillance, emerging tech ethics. Nothing that seemed particularly dangerous or controversial. But as I went through her published articles, I noticed a pattern in her recent work: increased focus on digital encryption, anonymous networks, and references to something called invitation-only forums. Her last published piece mentioned research into the modern digital underground, but provided few specifics. I reached out to her editor, who seemed reluctant to discuss her unfinished work. After persistent questioning, he finally admitted that Mia had been working on a series about dark web marketplaces, specifically focusing on the myths and realities of what she called pay-per-view trauma. He claimed he had discouraged the project, believing it was both journalistically dubious and potentially unsafe. Mia had insisted on continuing her research, promising to be careful and maintain anonymity online. With this information, I contacted a friend from college who worked in cybersecurity. He hesitated when I explained what I needed, but my desperation must have been obvious. He agreed to help me access Mia's online accounts, though he made it clear he was only doing this because it involved a missing person. Mia's email gave us little to work with, mostly routine correspondence, subscription newsletters, and communications with known sources. Her cloud storage contained research for published articles, but nothing about her current project. It was her browser history that provided our first real lead. Although she had apparently cleared it regularly, the synced data from her accounts showed repeated visits to forums discussing anonymous browsing techniques, cryptocurrency transactions, and secure communication methods. My cybersecurity friend showed me how to safely install a Tor browser and access some of the sites Mia had visited. Most were surprisingly mundane: privacy-focused discussion boards, whistleblower information exchanges, and academic research repositories. But one recurring address stood out: an alphanumeric string ending in .onion that Mia had visited multiple times in the weeks before her disappearance. My friend couldn't access it directly. It required login credentials we didn't have. I spent the next several weeks learning everything I could about dark web navigation, cryptocurrency, and secure communication protocols. I created anonymous accounts on the forums Mia had frequented, carefully asking questions about the mysterious .onion address. Most users ignored me. Some warned me to stop asking. One sent a private message claiming the address belonged to a site called The Viewing Room, describing it as a place where everything has a price, especially the truth. This user, who went by the handle Perennial Watcher, claimed to have information about my sister, though they never specified how they knew we were connected. They offered to help me access the viewing room, but only if I agreed to their conditions. I would need to make a cryptocurrency payment, use only their recommended security measures, and promise never to reveal their involvement. The whole exchange felt dangerous, potentially illegal, but my desperation overwhelmed my caution. I agreed. The instructions arrived the next day: elaborate security protocols, specific times to attempt access, and a cryptocurrency wallet address for payment. The amount translated to roughly $500. I followed every step precisely, making the payment and downloading additional security software. 3 days later, I received login credentials and detailed instructions for accessing the viewing room. The site itself was minimalist: black background, simple text navigation, no graphics. The main page displayed only a welcome message and a membership tier system ranging from observer to director. My credentials gave me observer access, apparently the lowest level. This tier allowed viewing of archived sessions, but no participation in live events. A counter in the corner showed 37 current users online. The archive section contained dozens of video files organized by date. Each had a clinical title format, a number followed by a letter designation and timestamp. No descriptions, no previews. With trembling fingers, I clicked on the most recent file. The video showed a simple room with white walls. A person sat in a chair facing the camera, their face obscured by digital blurring. They held a card with a date and time from 2 weeks earlier, presumably proving the video's authenticity. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then text appeared on screen, apparently messages from viewers asking for specific actions. The blurred figure would comply with simple requests, raising a hand, displaying a newspaper, turning to show different angles of the room. The video ended after approximately 20 minutes. I watched several more videos, all following the same pattern. Different rooms, different blurred figures, but the same basic concept. Viewers making requests, subjects complying. Nothing overtly violent or disturbing, just strangely clinical and detached. I couldn't understand why this would interest Mia journalistically, nor why accessing such content would put her in danger. Then I noticed a search function. With growing unease, I entered Mia's name. No results. I tried various keywords related to her: journalist, reporter, investigation. Nothing. Finally, in desperation, I searched for the date of her disappearance. 3 results appeared. I selected the first file, dated the night Mia went missing. The video began like the others. A white room, a chair, a blurred figure holding the date card. But something about the person's posture, the way they held themselves, triggered a visceral recognition. Despite the digital obscuring, I knew I was looking at my sister. The realization hit me physically, a wave of nausea and dizziness that nearly caused me to black out. When I steadied myself and focused again on the screen, the video had progressed. Mia remained seated, responding to viewer instructions. Text messages scrolled alongside the video. Usernames I didn't recognize, making requests that grew increasingly personal. They asked about her work, her investigation, what she knew about the viewing room. Mia's responses were not audible. All videos on the site played without sound, but I could see her speaking, her body language becoming more tense as the session continued. Approximately 15 minutes into the video, a new username appeared in the chat: Director Prime. Their message was simple: interview concluded. Proceeding to assessment phase. The tenor of the chat changed immediately, messages coming rapidly with single-word responses: breach, compromise, liability, confirmed. A final message from Director Prime appeared: consensus reached, signal termination approved. The video ended abruptly. I immediately clicked on the second search result, dated 1 day later. This video showed the same room but empty. The third video, dated 1 week after her disappearance, displayed only a black screen with text: asset containment complete. Archive restricted to Tier 3 and above. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what I had seen. The clinical detachment of the interface, the bureaucratic language of the chat, the implication of what signal termination might mean. It all pointed to something organized, systematic, and terrifying. This wasn't random violence or opportunistic crime. This was something that operated with rules, procedures, consensus decisions. I tried to access additional information, searching for Director Prime or any of the other usernames I had seen in the chat. Each attempt was met with an access denied message. After approximately 30 minutes of increasingly frantic searching, my screen went black, replaced by a single line of text. Observer status revoked. Connection terminated. I immediately contacted my cybersecurity friend, explaining what I had found. His reaction was grave concern, not just for Mia, but for my safety as well. He insisted on coming over, bringing equipment to secure my devices and network. While waiting for him to arrive, I received an email from an address consisting only of numbers. The subject line was Observation Notice. The body contained 3 lines of text. Your access to restricted archives has been logged. Your connection to Subject 47J has been confirmed. Your status has been updated to Person of Interest. Below this was an image, a still frame from what appeared to be a security camera, showing the exterior of my apartment building. The timestamp was from 10 minutes earlier. My friend arrived 30 minutes later, immediately disconnecting my router and checking my apartment for unknown devices. He found nothing obvious, but explained that if the people behind the viewing room were as sophisticated as they appeared, they might have capabilities beyond what we could easily detect. He suggested I leave my apartment immediately, use only cash, and avoid any devices connected to my name or accounts. I spent the next several weeks moving between budget hotels, using public computers for limited online activities, and trying to decide what to do. Going to the police seemed logical, but what evidence did I have? A website I had accessed illegally, videos that no longer existed in any form I could share, and an email that had disappeared from the temporary account I had been using. Even if they believed me, what could they investigate? Eventually, I contacted a journalist from a major newspaper who specialized in technology and privacy issues. Without revealing my identity, I shared what I had discovered about the viewing room, emphasizing my sister's disappearance and the apparent organization behind the site. The journalist was cautious but interested, asking detailed questions and requesting any documentation I could provide. 3 days after this contact, the journalist's social media accounts went silent. A week later, a brief notice appeared in the newspaper's staff section, stating they had taken a leave of absence for personal reasons. My attempts to re-establish contact went unanswered. That was 2 months ago. I've since returned to my normal life, or the appearance of it. I go to work, maintain my routine, use my regular devices, but I've installed every security measure recommended by my increasingly paranoid cybersecurity friend. I use different phones regularly. I sweep my apartment for surveillance devices daily. I watch for patterns, for people who appear too frequently in my periphery. Sometimes I convince myself it was all an elaborate hoax, a twisted prank or scam, targeting people searching for missing loved ones. Sometimes I believe Mia stumbled onto something real, something organized and dangerous that operates in plain sight through our digital infrastructure. Most days, I fluctuate between these possibilities, unable to settle on which is more terrifying. Last week, I received a package containing Mia's laptop. No return address, no note. The device powered on normally but had been wiped clean. Factory settings restored, no personal data remaining. The only new file was a text document containing a single line. Investigation closed. Signal terminated. Observers reassigned. Yesterday, I noticed a new Wi-Fi network appearing intermittently near my apartment. The name changes but always follows the same pattern. A number, followed by a letter designation, followed by observer. It appears strongest late at night, when the building is quiet. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I watch my device list and see unknown connections attempting to join my network. Each attempt lasts exactly 47 seconds before disappearing. I don't know if Mia is alive. I don't know who operates the viewing room or what their purpose truly is. I don't know if they're private citizens, criminal organizations, or something with governmental connections. What I do know is that somewhere right now, someone is watching through a screen as another person holds up today's date on a card. Somewhere decisions are being made about who constitutes a liability. Somewhere a consensus is being reached. And increasingly, I feel like I'm sitting in a white room, my face obscured to viewers I cannot see, waiting for the moment when my signal too is terminated. The strangest thing about renting out your spare room on Airbnb is how normal the dangerous people can seem. 3 months ago, I thought I was just providing budget accommodation in my Nottingham terraced house to help pay the mortgage. Now I'm hiding in a travel lodge in Derby, knowing that tomorrow night thousands of people on the dark web will watch me become the unwilling star of something I helped create without realizing it. I've been hosting guests for about 18 months. My house is nothing special. 2 bedrooms, small garden, decent location near the city centre. After my partner moved out last year, I needed the extra income to cover the mortgage payments. Airbnb seemed like an obvious solution. Most guests were exactly what you'd expect: tourists, business travellers, people visiting family. The occasional odd one, but nothing concerning. The booking that changed everything came through in early November. A guest named David Chen wanted to stay for 3 weeks, paying in advance. His profile showed several good reviews from previous hosts in other cities. He claimed to be a freelance photographer working on a documentary project about urban architecture in the Midlands. The extended stay and advance payment made it an attractive booking. David arrived on a Sunday evening, carrying professional camera equipment and a large metallic case that he said contained lighting gear. He was polite, quiet, and seemed genuinely interested in the city's industrial heritage. He kept regular hours, going out during the day with his camera equipment and returning in the evening. He was the kind of guest hosts dream about: tidy, respectful, no complaints. After his first week, David asked if he could use the basement for storing and organizing his equipment. My house has a cellar that I use for storage and the boiler, accessed through a door in the kitchen. I agreed, mainly because he offered to pay an additional fee for the privilege. The extra money was helpful, and I rarely went down there anyway. Over the following days, I noticed David making multiple trips to the basement, carrying equipment I didn't recognize. When I asked about his project, he explained that he was documenting forgotten spaces in urban environments: basements, abandoned buildings, industrial sites. He said the documentation required specialized lighting and recording equipment to capture these spaces properly. About halfway through his stay, David asked if I'd be interested in featuring my house in his documentary. He explained that Victorian terraced houses like mine represented important architectural heritage, and the basement would be particularly interesting as an example of period construction techniques. He offered to pay me a consultation fee for appearing in the documentary. The money was tempting, and the project sounded legitimate. David showed me some of his previous work on his laptop: professional quality photographs and videos of various urban locations. Everything appeared above board. We agreed that he would film a short segment with me discussing the house's history and architectural features. The filming took place in the basement on a Wednesday evening. David had set up impressive lighting equipment that transformed the dingy space into something that looked almost cinematic. Multiple cameras captured different angles, As I talked about the house's Victorian features and how the basement reflected period construction methods, David was professional throughout the process, asking thoughtful questions about architectural details and the neighborhood's history. The session lasted about an hour, after which he thanked me and said he'd send me a copy once the documentary was complete. I returned upstairs feeling pleased with the extra income and curious to see the finished product. Over the next few days, I noticed David working late into the night in the basement. I could hear equipment running, the sound of keyboards, and occasionally what sounded like video editing software. When I mentioned the noise, he apologized and explained that he was under deadline pressure to complete the project. He offered to buy me noise-cancelling headphones as compensation. David's stay ended the following Sunday. He packed his equipment, thanked me for the accommodation, and left excellent feedback on the platform. I thought that would be the end of our interaction. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line contained my full name and address. The body contained a link to what appeared to be a dark web site. A .onion address that could only be accessed through specialized browsers. The message explained that my performance had been well received and that there was interest in a follow-up appearance. I was confused but curious enough to download Tor and access the link. The site had a stark, professional design with minimal text. It showed what appeared to be a preview of David's documentary, but the content was nothing like what we had filmed. The video showed my basement, but it had been edited to look like a completely different space. The lighting made it appear more confined and institutional. More disturbing was how my interview had been edited. My words about the basement's construction had been cut and rearranged to make it sound like I was describing a purpose-built space for containing people. Comments about the solid Victorian walls and soundproofing qualities of the basement had been edited to seem like I was advertising features for imprisonment. At the bottom of the page was a counter showing several thousand viewers and a section for what appeared to be cryptocurrency payments. There were also comments in various languages discussing the upcoming live event and speculation about when the subject would be brought to the location. I realized that David hadn't been making a documentary about architecture. He'd been creating promotional material for something much darker. My basement had been transformed into what appeared to be a dark web red room, and I had unknowingly provided the introduction. I tried to contact the site administrators to demand the removal of my image and information about my house, but the contact methods led to encrypted messaging systems that never responded. I considered going to the police, but explaining that I discovered my basement being advertised on the dark web for purposes I didn't fully understand seemed both implausible and potentially incriminating. Instead, I changed the locks on my house and resolved to be more careful about future guests. I thought the incident was over, that David had moved on to find another location for whatever he was really planning. 3 weeks later, I received another Airbnb booking request, this time from someone calling themselves Sarah Williams, who wanted to stay for a weekend. Her profile was sparse but contained positive reviews. She said she was visiting Nottingham for medical appointments. Something about the booking felt off. The messaging was too formal, the timing seemed random, but I needed the income. Sarah arrived on Friday evening carrying a small bag and what appeared to be medical equipment. She explained that she had a rare condition requiring specialized monitoring devices. She was polite and professional, much like David had been. She asked about the basement almost immediately, claiming she needed a quiet, temperature-controlled environment for her medical equipment. I refused, explaining that the basement wasn't suitable for guests. She seemed disappointed but didn't press the issue. However, that night I heard sounds from the basement. Footsteps, equipment being moved, voices. When I investigated, I found the door unlocked and evidence that someone had been down there recently. Sarah had gone out, ostensibly for a medical appointment, but I suspected she was connected to David's project. I searched her room and found sophisticated computer equipment hidden in her luggage, along with what appeared to be dark web communication devices. I also found printed materials in various languages, advertising a live event scheduled for the following week. I confronted Sarah when she returned, demanding an explanation. She remained calm and professional, but her story changed. She claimed to be working with David on a legitimate research project about urban exploration and abandoned spaces. She showed me documents that appeared to support this explanation, including what looked like academic credentials and research permits. But that night, I discovered the truth about what was happening in my basement. Unable to sleep, I crept downstairs and found Sarah working at a computer setup I hadn't seen before. Multiple screens showed dark web sites with familiar .onion addresses, cryptocurrency wallets with substantial balances, and chat systems discussing the upcoming Nottingham event. One screen showed my basement, but it had been further modified since David's visit. Additional equipment had been installed, including restraints and what appeared to be medical monitoring devices. The space had been transformed into a fully functional red room, complete with multiple camera angles and interactive systems that would allow dark web viewers to influence what happened there. Sarah noticed me watching, and her demeanor changed completely. She explained that I was already complicit in their operation, that my filmed introduction had been used to promote the space, and that my continued cooperation was expected. She showed me viewer statistics and payment records demonstrating the substantial interest in the Nottingham facility. The final component of their plan was clear. They needed a host for the space, someone who could provide legitimacy and deflect suspicion, someone who could book future guests and maintain the property between events, someone who was already compromised by their participation in the promotional material. I told Sarah to leave immediately, that I would contact the police, that I wanted nothing to do with their operation. She remained calm, explaining that the evidence of my participation was already online, that my face and voice were associated with the space, that authorities would find it difficult to believe I wasn't aware of what was happening in my own basement. She left the next morning, but not before explaining that the Nottingham event would proceed as scheduled, that interested parties had already paid substantial sums to access the broadcast, that the space was prepared and the audience was waiting. Over the following week, I received constant messages through various platforms, encrypted emails, anonymous texts, dark web communications. All carried the same theme. I was expected to facilitate the upcoming event, to provide access to the space, to ensure that operations could proceed without interference. I've been staying in different hotels since then, but the messages keep finding me. They know my location, my schedule, my vulnerabilities. They provided evidence of their surveillance, photographs of me in public, recordings of my phone conversations, details about my daily routines. Yesterday, I received the most explicit message yet, a video showing my basement fully prepared for broadcast with professional lighting and multiple camera angles, a countdown timer showing less than 24 hours remaining, and a reminder that my cooperation was not optional, that I had already been promoted as the host of the facility, that thousands of dark web viewers were expecting the event to proceed. The message included details about how they had tracked my movements, monitored my communications, and prepared contingencies for various scenarios. They had evidence of my filmed introduction, records of payments made to my accounts, and documentation of my voluntary participation in what they could present as willing cooperation with their operation. I'm writing this from a travel lodge outside Derby, using a public computer. I don't know if this will reach anyone who can help, or if sharing this story will make my situation worse. I only know that tomorrow night, thousands of people on the dark web will expect to see a broadcast from my basement, and I'm running out of places to hide. The most terrifying realization is that they never needed to force me to participate. They just needed me to become complicit gradually, one small decision at a time. Accepting David's booking, agreeing to the basement usage, participating in the filming. Each step seemed reasonable individually, but together they created a chain of involvement I can't escape. The dark web red room they've created isn't in some remote warehouse or abandoned building. It's in my house, registered to my name, promoted with my face and voice. Even if I never participate directly, I'm already the host. The space exists because I allowed it to be created. Tomorrow's broadcast will happen whether I'm there or not. They've made that clear. The only question is whether I face whatever comes next, or let someone else become the victim of a system I inadvertently helped build. The viewer counter on the latest message shows tens of thousands of people waiting. People who have paid in cryptocurrency to access the broadcast. People who believe they're about to see something exclusive and authentic. People who don't care that the host never intended to become part of this horror. I keep thinking about David's professional demeanor, Sarah's medical equipment story, the gradual way they transformed my basement into something unrecognizable. How many other Airbnb hosts have been approached with similar projects? How many spare rooms and basements across the country might be serving similar purposes? The dark web has made it possible for these operations to exist anywhere, to recruit hosts unknowingly, to create content that appears consensual but isn't. The technology makes it easy to hide, to pay anonymously, to consume horror without consequence. I should have trusted my instincts about David's equipment, should have questioned why he needed such sophisticated gear for architectural photography, should have refused to participate in any filming, should have investigated the basement modifications more carefully. But it's too late for regrets now. Tomorrow night, my basement becomes a dark web broadcast studio. Whether I'm there or someone else takes my place, the show will go on. I keep telling myself this will all blow over, that I'm overreacting. Normal people don't suddenly become fugitives because of something they saw at work. But then I remember their faces when they caught me in that room, and I know I'm not imagining things. It started with expense reports that didn't add up, just boring accounting stuff. Nobody gets killed over spreadsheet errors. At least that's what I thought before last month. I never thought I'd be the type of person to stumble onto something I wasn't supposed to see. My life has always been painfully normal. Working as a forensic accountant for a mid-sized insurance company, living in a one-bedroom apartment in Cincinnati, spending weekends either reading or binging whatever new show everyone was talking about. Nothing remarkable. Nothing that would make me a target. It started with a simple discrepancy in the books. Our company had been showing unusual expenses categorized vaguely as network infrastructure maintenance. Large payments happening monthly that didn't match any of our regular vendor contracts. As the senior forensic accountant, it fell on me to figure out why. The CFO was breathing down our department's neck because these unexplained costs were affecting our quarterly projections. My initial audit showed unusual purchases coming from a single cost center within our building, specifically one tied to the executive floor. The strange part was that the equipment being purchased wasn't standard office technology. It was high-end server components, advanced networking gear, and specialized hardware that our insurance company had no business buying. The paperwork traced back to an authorization code for a supply closet on the executive floor. Not an office, not a conference room, a supply closet. I decided to check it out myself rather than escalate to my manager. Looking back, that was my first mistake. Getting access to the executive floor after hours required a security badge with special permissions. I didn't have those permissions, but I did have access to the security logs for my audit work. Another mistake. I noticed a cleaning crew badge that consistently accessed the executive floor every evening. A badge that, according to HR records, belonged to a person who had quit 3 months ago. The badge was still active. I borrowed it from the security office, claiming I needed to check its access history for my audit. Just temporarily, I told myself. Just to solve the financial discrepancy. I wasn't planning to snoop around or anything. The executive floor was eerily quiet after 7 p.m. The cleaning crew had already come and gone, leaving behind the faint smell of industrial cleaner and the soft hum of air conditioning. I followed the purchasing records and traced the equipment deliveries to the supply closet at the end of the hallway. The door was unmarked and locked with a keypad, not standard for a supply closet. I hadn't expected that. I stood there for a moment, contemplating whether I should turn back. But curiosity got the better of me. From my audit work, I had access to the company's vendor payment systems. I checked recent maintenance records for that floor and found the contractor who had installed the keypad. Their invoice included the default access code that had been programmed initially. Another ethical line crossed. The closet was dark when I entered, smelling of dust and electronics rather than cleaning supplies. When I flipped the light switch, I found not mops and paper towels, but a small server setup, a powerful custom-built machine connected directly to our network backbone. It had multiple hard drives attached to it, a high-end graphics card, and several cameras connected via USB. This wasn't company equipment. Someone had installed their own private server in a hidden location. I should have walked away then, should have reported it and let security handle it. Instead, I examined the equipment, thinking I'd just check what kind of operation was running that required such expensive gear. Professional curiosity, I told myself. The server had a spreadsheet with login credentials saved right on the desktop. Whoever set it up probably never expected anyone to physically access it. Within minutes, I was looking through their files. What I found was a sophisticated streaming setup with automated scheduling software that activated every night. It was configured to connect to an encrypted address, a dark website. I recognized enough about cybersecurity from our company's compliance training to know this wasn't good, but I didn't immediately connect the dots to what I was looking at. The server contained archived video files, each labeled with dates going back months. Against my better judgment, I opened one from the previous week. The video showed a room I recognized, our company's soundproofed wellness room that had been installed during the pandemic for employees who needed a quiet space. Only in the video, it didn't look like a wellness room anymore. The furniture had been rearranged, and plastic sheeting covered the floor and walls. A person lay strapped to a table in the center, clearly terrified but unable to move or speak due to restraints and a gag. A figure in a dark mask stood over them, methodically arranging what looked like medical instruments on a small tray. I shut the video off before I saw what happened next. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely use the mouse. This was a red room, one of those dark web myth horror stories where people paid to watch torture or worse. Except it wasn't a myth, and it was happening in my building, on my company's dime. My mind raced through implications. The unusual expenses, the specialized equipment, the location on the executive floor. Someone high up in my company was running this operation, using our infrastructure, our building, and I had just accessed their server, leaving fingerprints everywhere. I disconnected from the server, closed the closet door, and tried to appear normal as I walked to the elevator, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure anyone could hear it. I drove home in a daze, constantly checking my rearview mirror, certain I was being followed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, debating what to do. Go to the police. I had no proof. I hadn't downloaded any files, and accessing that server the way I did was technically illegal. Go to my boss. What if they were involved? The server was on the executive floor after all. Morning came, and I called in sick for the first time in 3 years. I spent the day researching, trying to figure out how these red room operations worked. The more I learned, the worse it got. These weren't just random victims. They were carefully selected, often people without close family or connections, people who wouldn't be missed immediately. My company processed insurance claims. We had access to detailed information about people's lives, their family situations, their medical histories. As a forensic accountant, I had seen patterns in our life insurance claim denials, single people, immigrants, people estranged from their families, all with policies that had lapsed just before their mysterious disappearances. I decided to gather evidence properly. That night, I went back to the office with a plan. I brought a portable drive and planned to copy just enough evidence to take to the FBI, then wipe my prints from the server room. It would be risky, but I couldn't live with myself if I did nothing. The executive floor was dark again when I arrived. I made my way to the closet, used the code, and slipped inside. But as soon as I touched the server, I knew something was wrong. It was cool to the touch, powered down. Someone knew it had been discovered. As I turned to leave, the door opened. My boss stood there, looking unsurprised to see me. Behind him was our chief operating officer, a man I'd seen only in company-wide meetings. They didn't need to speak. Their expressions said everything. The subtle nod of acknowledgement from my boss, the evaluating gaze of the COO as he looked me up and down, the slight gesture toward the hallway, inviting me to follow, the unspoken threat hanging in the air between us. I realized with sickening clarity what was happening. They weren't going to kill me. They were recruiting me. I managed to respond with a non-committal gesture, a nervous smile, pretending to consider their unspoken offer while inching toward the door. They let me leave, their eyes following me all the way to the elevator. I drove home in a panic, threw some clothes in a bag, and headed straight for the interstate. I drove through the night, stopping only for gas, paying cash. I abandoned my car in Indianapolis and bought a used one from a private seller on Craigslist. I withdrew my savings in small amounts from different ATMs to avoid triggering alerts. It's been 3 weeks now. I'm writing this from a motel room in a small town I won't name, using a laptop I bought secondhand and a prepaid internet connection. I've changed my appearance, stopped using credit cards or my phone. In my paranoia, I've checked this room for hidden cameras at least a dozen times today alone. The thing that keeps me awake isn't just fear of being found. It's what I realized on that long drive away from Cincinnati. The financial records I'd been auditing showed connections to shell companies all over the world. This wasn't a small operation. The Red Room was just one part of something much larger, a network that had potentially been operating for years, hidden behind legitimate business transactions. Sometimes I think about the faces I saw in the company directory, wondering which ones were involved and which ones might have been victims. I wonder if I should have gone to the authorities immediately. Consequences be damned. But then I remember the casual confidence of my boss and the COO. How unworried they seemed about my discovery. These weren't people afraid of getting caught. Yesterday, I noticed a car I didn't recognize parked across from my motel. It was there all day, and when I woke up this morning, it was gone. But there was a different, unfamiliar car in its place. It could be nothing, just travelers passing through. But I don't think so. My options are narrowing. I've considered going to the FBI, but I have no evidence, and I accessed that server illegally. I've thought about reaching out to journalists, but how do I know which ones I can trust? Everyone has an online presence now, connections that can be traced, leveraged. The owner of this motel knocked on my door an hour ago. His face was neutral, but his eyes were nervous. Someone had called asking about a person matching my description. A concerned relative looking for their missing cousin, he said. I shook my head, thanked him for letting me know. He nodded and left without another word. I'm checking out tonight anyway. As I pack my few belongings, I keep thinking about balance sheets, how it all started with a simple financial discrepancy, money flowing where it shouldn't. Now my life has become a similar anomaly, moving in patterns I never anticipated, always aware of watching eyes. If you're reading this, it means I've decided to upload my story somewhere public, maybe as insurance, maybe as a warning. I don't know if it will make a difference. All I know is that the world has hidden depths I never imagined, running parallel to our everyday lives, separated by nothing more than a door we're not supposed to open. I opened that door, and now I can never close it again. It started with boredom, really. That's the thing about night shifts. They stretch on endlessly, especially when you're the only one there. 4 years working as a network security specialist for a mid-sized tech firm in London, and I still hadn't adjusted to the isolation. The office building near empty, just me and the occasional security guard making their rounds. The job itself wasn't difficult. Monitor systems, patch vulnerabilities, document any unusual traffic. By 2 a.m., I typically finished the actual work, leaving hours to fill before my shift ended. Most nights I'd read tech blogs or work on side projects. Sometimes I'd watch Netflix with the volume low, one eye on the security monitors. It was during one of these mind-numbing shifts that my life changed completely. Even now, I can't sleep properly. The doctor says it's stress-related insomnia, prescribes Zopiclone that does nothing but leave a metallic taste in my mouth. How could I tell him the real reason? That every time I close my eyes, I see what I saw that night, that I'm afraid of who I'm becoming. My colleague Jamie first mentioned the dark web to me during a shift change. He wasn't suggesting anything illegal, just talking about how fascinating it was from a technical perspective, the way people had created this entire shadow internet. Being in network security, I understood the mechanisms better than most, but I'd never actually explored it myself. Jamie described forums where people discussed everything from political dissidents to black market pharmaceuticals. He made it sound like an anthropological study, observing human behavior when anonymity was guaranteed. That night, I downloaded Tor, just to see what the fuss was about. The first few weeks, I just browsed. Mostly mundane stuff. Forums for people discussing drugs. Some marketplaces selling counterfeit goods. Political message boards. Nothing you couldn't find on the regular internet, really. Just with more paranoia and worse user interfaces. I was almost disappointed. Where was this digital underworld I'd heard about? Then I found a forum called Viewing Gallery. The description claimed it was for discussing real footage that the mainstream won't show you. I figured it was probably just conspiracy theorists sharing grainy UFO videos or something equally benign. I was wrong. The forum was divided into categories, each more disturbing than the last. War footage, industrial accidents, medical procedures gone wrong. Things I wished I could unsee, but found myself morbidly unable to look away from. One category was simply labeled rooms. I clicked it and found dozens of threads with cryptic titles like December Session Number 4 or Jakarta Special Viewing. The discussions beneath were vague but enthusiastic, with users thanking the hosts and requesting specific scenarios for future events. I didn't understand at first. Then I saw a comment. When's the next live show? Last one was cut short when subject expired too quickly. That's when I realized what I was looking at. Red rooms, supposedly live streams of torture or murder that viewers could watch or even direct. I'd always assumed they were an urban legend, something that conspiracy theorists and paranoid parents warned about, but that didn't actually exist. The technical challenges alone seemed insurmountable. How could you stream something like that securely without getting caught? I should have closed the browser. I should have walked away. Instead, I clicked on a pinned thread labeled verification process. The post explained that new viewers needed to be vetted before gaining access to live streams. There was a complicated process involving cryptocurrency payments and identity verification. Not your real identity, of course, but proof that you were a consistent persona and not law enforcement. I told myself I was just curious about the technical aspects. How were they maintaining security? What kind of streaming setup could handle this without being traceable? Professional curiosity. That's what I called it, as I created a dedicated persona and began the verification process. It took 3 weeks. Bitcoin transfers to anonymous wallets. Answers to increasingly disturbing hypothetical questions. References from existing members. I found someone willing to vouch for me in exchange for helping them with some network security issues. Each step giving me plenty of opportunities to back out, to realize what I was doing. But by then, I was too invested. I kept telling myself I would just look once, to confirm whether these rooms were real, and then I'd report everything to the National Crime Agency. The first live stream I gained access to was scheduled for 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. I requested the night shift at work, knowing I'd be alone with secure internet access. As the designated time approached, a private message appeared with a one-time link. The message included instructions. No recording software, no screenshots, viewing limited to 45 minutes. I clicked the link. The video quality wasn't great, deliberately degraded, I assumed, to hide identifying details. The room was sparse. Concrete floor, white walls, a drain in the center, bright, clinical lighting, a metal table with restraints. It looked almost like a film set, too clean and deliberate to be real. A figure entered the frame wearing a plain mask that covered their entire head. They moved with casual confidence, adjusting the camera slightly before stepping away. Text appeared in a chat window beside the video. Welcome to tonight's viewing. 14 participants confirmed. Subject will arrive momentarily. Standard rules apply. My heart was pounding. This couldn't be real. It had to be staged. some kind of extreme performance art or a very convincing simulation. Then the subject was brought in. I won't describe that person in detail. I can't. Even now, months later, I can barely bring myself to acknowledge what I saw, what I watched, what I didn't stop. The host addressed the camera occasionally, responding to requests in the chat. I didn't type anything. I couldn't move. I just stared, telling myself this elaborate hoax would reveal itself any moment. It never did. 27 minutes in, I closed the browser and vomited into my bin. I deleted Tor, ran security scrubs on my computer, and spent the rest of my shift shaking in my chair. I told myself I would report it in the morning. I would find a way to anonymously tip off the NCA or Interpol, someone who could trace the stream and stop these people. I didn't, because I wasn't sure I could report it without implicating myself, because a small, terrible part of me wasn't completely convinced it was real, because most shamefully, I was afraid. 2 days later, I received an email to my personal account, the one not connected to my dark web activities. It contained a single line. "Did you enjoy the show? Your attendance was noted." I changed my email, my mobile number, eventually my flat. I found a new job across the country. I tell myself they were just trying to scare me, that they can't really track me to my real identity. But sometimes my new laptop camera light turns on by itself, just for a few seconds before going dark again. My IT knowledge tells me it's probably just a software glitch. My nightmares tell me something else. I know they're watching me now. I've become the subject in a different kind of room. Sometimes, late at night, I think I hear breathing on the other end of my phone line. Or I'll catch a glimpse of someone with a familiar way of moving, standing too still at the edge of a crowd. I've installed security cameras, extra locks, a VPN. I sleep with a cricket bat beside my bed. None of it helps, because I know what I did. I know what I saw and didn't stop. I know what's out there now, hiding in plain sight behind proxy servers and encrypted connections. Here's the thing about the dark web that no one tells you. Once you've really seen it, it never stops seeing you. I've written this as a warning, though I doubt it will make a difference. Curiosity is too powerful. That's why those rooms exist in the first place, because there will always be people who want to see, who need to witness the worst things humans can do to each other. I understand now that the viewers are as much a part of those rooms as the people wearing masks. Last week, I received a small package at my new address, the one no one is supposed to know. Inside was a plain white mask and a note with an IP address, an invitation. They're offering me a different seat this time, a promotion of sorts. I threw the mask away, burned the note, but I know the choice isn't really gone. It sits with me in my flat each night as I check and recheck the logs. It follows me to work, to Tesco, everywhere I go. The worst part isn't the fear. It's the tiny voice in the back of my mind, the one that wonders what it would be like on the other side of the camera. The voice that's been there all along, perhaps, just waiting for permission to speak. I've started locking my kitchen knives in a safe. I catch myself researching remote locations, properties with cellars, soundproofing materials. I close the browser each time, horrified at myself, but the searches become more frequent, more detailed. When my neighbor played his music too loudly last week, I found myself thinking not about asking him to turn it down, but about how no one would hear anything from his flat if the music was always that loud. I stood outside his door for 30 minutes before walking away, trembling and sick with myself. I don't know if what I saw that night changed me or revealed something that was always there. I don't know if I'm being hunted or recruited or both. I'm writing this now because I need someone to know, to understand what these places do to a person. The forums call it the viewer effect. The theory is that watching changes your brain chemistry permanently. I think it's simpler than that. I think watching makes you complicit. It makes you one of them. And once you're one of them, there's no going back to who you were before. Yesterday, I found myself in Curry's examining camera equipment, high-definition models with excellent low-light performance. The shop assistant asked what I was planning to film. I didn't have an answer. I left without buying anything, but I know I'll go back, or find another shop, or order online using one of the anonymous payment methods I learned about. The mask I threw away. Sometimes I think I see it out of the corner of my eye, sitting on my bedside table or kitchen worktop. When I look directly, it's gone. But I know it's here, waiting. Just like I know that someday, maybe soon, I'll try it on. I keep telling myself I can resist this pull towards something monstrous, that I am still essentially good, essentially human. But late at night, when my laptop screen glows in the darkness of my bedroom, I'm less certain. If you're reading this, perhaps you felt that same curiosity. Perhaps you're considering taking that first step, downloading Tor, finding those forums just to see, just to know. Don't. Or if you do, know that you're not just looking into an abyss. You're opening a door that swings both ways, and what comes through might be wearing your face. My mobile is buzzing now with a text from a number I don't recognize. It's an address, somewhere local, and a time. Tonight, I won't go. I can't go. But I haven't deleted the message, and I know exactly how long it would take me to get there on the tube. I've always been good with languages. It's the one skill that came naturally to me when everything else felt like a struggle. By 25, I was fluent in 4 languages besides English and working on a 5th. People assumed I'd become a teacher or join the diplomatic service, but translation work paid better and let me work from home in my small flat in Oxford. Most of my jobs came through a freelancer website where clients post projects and translators bid for the work. It's competitive, but I'd built a solid reputation for accuracy and discretion, particularly with technical or specialized content. The majority of my work involved translating business documents, academic papers, or technical manuals. Nothing exciting, but it paid the bills. 3 months ago, I received a private message through the platform from someone who didn't have a public profile. They claimed to represent a research group studying dark web communication systems and needed a translator for content in languages I specialized in: Mandarin, Russian, Arabic, and Spanish. The message explained that the content might be disturbing as it related to criminal networks operating on the dark web, but assured me the research was for academic purposes and would help law enforcement agencies monitor these hidden corners of the internet. The pay they offered was substantial, nearly triple my usual rate, enough to clear my student debts within months rather than years. They explained that higher compensation was due to the disturbing nature of the material and the strict confidentiality requirements. I'd need to sign an extensive non-disclosure agreement and work through their secure platform rather than my usual channels. I should have been more skeptical, but the opportunity felt legitimate. The email addresses used academic domains, the contracts appeared professional, and the initial test translation they sent, an analysis of communication methods used by drug cartels, seemed consistent with criminology research. Besides, I'd translated medical documents and legal depositions before that contained disturbing content. I was confident in my ability to remain detached and professional. After completing the test piece to their satisfaction, I received access to their secure platform. It required multiple layers of authentication and used encryption that seemed unnecessarily robust for academic research. But I rationalized that this level of security made sense for sensitive work involving dark web criminal networks. They even provided me with special software to access .onion sites, dark web addresses not accessible through standard browsers. The first few weeks involved translating text conversations, dark web forum posts, and what appeared to be marketplace listings from various languages into English. The content was disturbing. Discussions of drug trafficking, weapons sales, and human smuggling on hidden sites accessible only through Tor networks. But nothing beyond what I'd expected given the project description. I maintained professional distance, focusing on accuracy rather than content. About a month into the project, the nature of the assignments began to shift. I started receiving links to video files hosted on their secure server. The brief explained that these were recordings of conversations between members of criminal organizations, and they needed both verbal and behavioral translations, noting cultural contexts and non-verbal communication that might not be obvious to researchers unfamiliar with the languages and cultures involved. The first few videos matched this description. Grainy footage of people discussing what appeared to be illegal business transactions in various languages. I transcribed and translated their conversations, noted cultural nuances, and provided context where needed. Then the videos began to change. The quality improved. The settings became more controlled. Stark rooms with concrete walls, minimal furniture, professional lighting. The conversations became one-sided, with one person speaking directly to the camera, while others remained silent in the background. The speakers began addressing viewers directly, promising special experiences and authentic content. I told myself this was just deeper research into how these networks marketed themselves, but I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the material. When I asked my contact about the changing nature of the content, they explained that the research had progressed to studying how these networks advertised to potential customers. The explanation seemed reasonable enough for me to continue. One night, I received an urgent translation request with a substantial bonus for immediate completion. The file was a live stream recording in Russian, hosted on a dark website with a complex .onion address. When I opened it, I was confronted with something I had never expected to see. The video showed a room similar to those I'd been seeing recently, but this time there was a person restrained in a chair. A masked individual stood nearby, occasionally adjusting camera equipment. The Russian speaker was describing what was about to happen and explaining how viewers could influence the proceedings through cryptocurrency payments. The entire setup was clearly a dark web red room, a live-streamed torture session where anonymous viewers could pay to request specific actions from anywhere in the world while hiding behind layers of encryption. I immediately closed the file and messaged my contact, explaining that I couldn't participate in translating this type of content and that they should report it to authorities. Their response was alarmingly casual. They thanked me for my concern, but explained that this was a sophisticated simulation created to study how these networks operated. They assured me no one was actually harmed in the creation of these educational materials. I wasn't convinced, but I also had no proof that what I'd seen wasn't staged. I decided to withdraw from the project anyway, citing ethical concerns. They accepted my decision and processed my final payment, which appeared in my bank account the next day, significantly more than what I was owed, with a note classifying the excess as a discretionary bonus for exceptional service. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. A week later, I received an email from a different address containing a video file. When I opened it, I saw a compilation of clips showing me in my flat, working at my desk, sleeping, showering, talking on the phone. All filmed from angles that suggested cameras had been installed throughout my home. The email contained no message, just the video. I searched my flat frantically, finding tiny cameras concealed in smoke detectors, light fixtures, and air vents. I removed them all, changed my locks, and spent the night at a friend's house. When I returned the next day, I found an envelope had been slipped under my door containing a USB drive. The drive held a single file, a video of what appeared to be an actual dark web Red Room broadcast, not a simulation. The setting was similar to the videos I'd been translating, but this was clearly real. The victim's fear was palpable, the violence undeniable. At the end of the video, text appeared in all 5 languages I spoke, stating that I was now complicit in their operation and that my translations had helped them expand their dark web audience to new markets across multiple language barriers. I went to the police immediately. I showed them the cameras I'd found, explained the work I'd been doing, and described the threatening video. They took the report seriously and sent an officer to check my flat for additional surveillance equipment. They found nothing beyond what I'd already discovered, but advised me to stay elsewhere while they investigated. Their investigation revealed that the academic domains used in the emails were spoofed. The payment had come through a series of dark web cryptocurrency exchanges designed to be untraceable. The secure platform I'd been working on had disappeared completely, leaving no digital footprint. They told me this had the hallmarks of a sophisticated dark web criminal operation and suggested I remain vigilant but try to resume normal life. I spent the next few weeks staying with friends, checking for surveillance, and jumping at every unexpected noise. Eventually, with no further contact from the people who had hired me, I began to relax slightly. Perhaps they had moved on, finding another translator who wouldn't question their requests. Then the messages started appearing on my phone. Text messages in different languages, all containing variations of the same theme. They knew where I was, they were watching me, and I had unfinished work to complete. The messages came from different numbers, sometimes in languages I didn't even work with. I changed my number twice, but the messages always found me. About a month after I went to the police, I received a package at my new temporary address, a place only my closest friends knew about. Inside was a high-quality digital camera and a list of instructions in multiple languages. I was to set up the camera at specific angles, test lighting conditions, and prepare for a live translation assignment at a designated time. The instructions emphasized that failure to comply would result in the release of videos showing me viewing and translating material related to criminal activities. I took the package to the police, who added it to their investigation, but warned me that these networks were notoriously difficult to track. They suggested I consider temporarily relocating to a different city while they continued to investigate. I moved to Glasgow, where a university friend had a spare room in her flat. I told no one except my immediate family where I was going. I found work translating mundane corporate documents under a different name. I started to rebuild some semblance of normal life. 3 weeks ago, I noticed someone following me home from the small office where I'd found work, a nondescript man in a dark coat who maintained the same distance behind me for several streets. When I changed direction suddenly, he adjusted his course to match. I lost him by ducking into a department store and leaving through a different exit, but the encounter left me shaken. The following day, I received an email containing a street view photograph of the building where I was staying in Glasgow. The subject line was simply, "Found you," written in all 5 languages I spoke. 2 days later, a courier delivered a package to my workplace. Inside was another digital camera, identical to the one I turned over to the police, and a note explaining that my debut broadcast had been scheduled for the following week. This time, the note included details about my friend's daily routine, my parents' home address, and my sister's workplace. The threat was clear: comply or those close to me would suffer. I'm now in a small bed and breakfast in the Scottish Highlands, using a public computer to write this. I've left my phone, laptop, and all other trackable devices behind. I paid cash for the train ticket and registered under a false name. But I know this is only a temporary solution. The most terrifying realization is that these people don't just want a translator. They want a performer. Someone who can communicate with victims and viewers in multiple languages simultaneously. Someone who can expand their audience beyond English-speaking viewers. Someone who can bring a unique skill to their broadcasts. When I translate materials, I don't just convert words from one language to another. I convey nuance, emotion, cultural context. I make communication feel natural and authentic across language barriers. It's a skill that took years to develop, and now it's being sought after for the most horrific purpose imaginable. The scheduled date for what they're calling my debut broadcast is 3 days from now. I've stopped running because I've realized there's nowhere I can go that they won't eventually find me. These people have resources, connections, and apparently unlimited access to surveillance. They tracked me across 3 cities through name changes and new devices. I've contacted the police again, sharing everything I know about the scheduled broadcast. They've promised to increase patrols near my family's homes and to continue investigating, but they've been frank about the limitations they face with these types of networks. Jurisdiction issues, encryption, anonymizing technology, all create barriers to effective law enforcement action. I keep thinking about how I unwittingly help these people expand their dark web audience. How many translations did I provide that helped them reach new viewers in the hidden corners of the internet? How many people paid in Bitcoin to access content because they could now understand what was being offered? I became part of their dark web operation without realizing it, and now they want to bring me fully into their world. Tonight, the owner of the bed and breakfast knocked on my door to let me know a package had arrived for me. A package addressed to the false name I'm using at a location I selected at random just yesterday. I haven't opened it. It's sitting on the dresser as I write this. I know what it contains. Another camera, another set of instructions, another reminder that they can find me anywhere. The broadcast is scheduled for Saturday night. I'm running out of options and places to hide. I keep hoping the police investigation will yield results before then, but I'm not optimistic. These networks have stayed ahead of law enforcement for years. They wouldn't have survived this long if they were easy to catch. The most disturbing thought is that if they force me to participate, thousands of people in multiple countries will be watching on the dark web. People who have paid in untraceable cryptocurrency for access. People hiding behind anonymous Tor browsers. People who consider this dark web entertainment, and I'll be expected to translate the horror into their native languages, making sure nothing is lost in translation. I never thought my gift for languages would make me valuable to people like this. I never imagined my skills would be sought after for something so horrific on the dark web. But in a perverse way, it makes sense. Expanding markets in the darkest corners of the internet requires breaking down language barriers, even for the most terrible content hidden behind layers of encryption and anonymity. I don't know what I'll do when Saturday comes. I don't know if there's anywhere left to run. I only know that my words have power, and for the first time in my life, That terrifies me. The package on the dresser just moved slightly. I think my time is up. I keep thinking this is someone else's life I'm living now. 8 weeks ago, my biggest worry was making rent on my flat in Brixton. Now I have a burner phone, 3 different hair colors in my bathroom bin, and a constant feeling like there's a target on my back, all because I tried to help someone I thought was my friend. My name doesn't matter anymore. I used to be a paralegal at a mid-sized corporate law firm in London. Nothing special, just contract reviews and document preparation. The pay was decent. My flat was small, but mine. And I had what I thought were good friends. Tara was one of them. We met at the firm 3 years ago. She was in marketing. I was in legal. We weren't best mates or anything, but we got lunch together sometimes and complained about our bosses. About 2 months ago, Tara stopped showing up to work. No calls, no emails, nothing. After a week, HR just said she'd resigned for personal reasons. It happened pretty quickly. One day she was there. The next her desk was cleared out. A few people tried calling her, but her number was disconnected. Her social media went dark. Nobody seemed particularly worried. People quit all the time. Except I had just seen her the Friday before she disappeared. We'd gotten drinks after work at our local in Soho, and she seemed fine. Better than fine, actually. She was excited about some side project she was working on that was going to let her finally quit the corporate grind. She was being secretive about it, but in a fun way, not concerning. Said she'd tell me all about it once everything was finalized. So when she vanished, I was worried. I tried her email, her old flatmate, even drove by her apartment in Clapham. The flatmate said Tara had moved out suddenly, no forwarding address. The building manager said the same thing. Rent paid through the month, keys left in the letterbox. That might have been the end of it, except for the thumb drive. Tara had borrowed my external hard drive a few weeks before she disappeared, saying she needed extra storage for some marketing videos. When she returned it, apparently she accidentally left one of her own thumb drives in the case. I didn't notice until I was using the hard drive myself and found this unmarked black USB stick. I figured it probably had her marketing stuff on it, maybe something she'd need for her new venture. I plugged it in, thinking I could email whatever files were on it to her personal account, even if she didn't respond. The drive was password protected, which was odd for work files. I was about to give up when I remembered Tara always used the same password for everything. Her cat's name, plus the year she graduated uni. It worked on the first try. There were only a few files on the drive. One was a text document with what looked like login credentials. Another was a spreadsheet with dates, times, and amounts. Large amounts, like tens of thousands of pounds each. The third was a video file simply labeled verification. The video wasn't long, maybe 2 minutes. It started with a black screen and text stating the date from about a month ago. Then it showed a plain room with concrete walls, maybe a basement. There was a person tied to a chair in the center, head covered with some kind of hood. A figure in a dark mask stood behind them, holding up a piece of paper with a series of numbers and today's date, like those hostage verification videos you sometimes hear about. The masked person then set the paper down, picked up something from a table just off camera, and approached the bound person. That's when I closed the video. I didn't want to see what happened next. I felt sick. My first thought was that this was some kind of joke, or maybe footage from an indie horror film Tara was working on. But then why the spreadsheet with all that money? And why would she have disappeared right after? I reopened the text file with the credentials. There was a URL I didn't recognize, not a normal website address, but something ending in .onion. I knew enough to recognize it as a Tor address, those hidden sites you can only access with special browsers. Below it was a username and password, along with instructions for a two-factor authentication app. I should have gone to the police right then. That would have been the smart thing to do. But I kept thinking about Tara. What if she was the person in that chair? What if she was in trouble and needed help? And if I'm being honest, I was curious. What was this thing she had been so excited about that had potentially gotten her into trouble? I installed the Tor browser that night. It took some figuring out, but I managed to get to the address. It looked like a simple login page with a plain black background and the word observatory at the top. No other information, no hints about what the site was for. I entered the username and password from the file. The next page asked for a verification code from the authentication app. I didn't have that, so I couldn't go further. But there was a small help link at the bottom of the page. I clicked it, expecting FAQs or contact information. Instead, it took me to a page explaining what the site was, a viewing platform for private events. The description was clinical, almost businesslike, but I understood what it meant. This was a red room, one of those dark web urban legends where people pay to watch torture or murder in real time. Except it wasn't a legend, it was real, and somehow Tara was involved. The page explained the pricing tiers. Basic membership was £8,000, which allowed viewing access only. Executive membership was £40,000, which granted voting rights on what happened during events. And then there was producer status at £200,000, which allowed members to commission specific events. I closed the browser immediately. This couldn't be real. These things didn't actually exist. They were stories people told to scare each other, like alligators in the sewers or razor blades in Halloween candy. But then I remembered the verification video, the date card, the spreadsheet with all those transactions. The next day at work, I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about Tara, about that video, about what I had found. Had she stumbled onto this like I had? Or was she involved somehow? I couldn't imagine her participating in something so horrific. But then again, she had been excited about a lucrative side project. During lunch, I used a computer in an unused conference room to do some research. I didn't want this in my search history. I looked up red rooms trying to find out if they were real or just internet folklore. Most sources said they were myths, technically impossible to stream reliably over the Tor network. But a few suggested they were real, but extremely rare, requiring significant technical infrastructure and insider connections to access. That evening, I made a decision I still regret. I went back to the site, but this time from a public computer at a library in Camden. I wanted to see if there was any way to find out more without actually logging in. There wasn't much, but I discovered a calendar of upcoming events visible on the login page. The next one was scheduled for Friday night, just 2 days away. I spent those 2 days trying to decide what to do. Go to the police. What would I say? I had a thumb drive with a disturbing video and login credentials to what might be an illegal site. Would they take me seriously? Would they think I was involved somehow? And what about Tara? If she was in danger, would going to the authorities put her at more risk? I decided to try one more thing before going to the police. I installed the two-factor authentication app and used the setup key that was in the text file. To my surprise, it worked. I now had access to the verification codes needed to fully log in. I didn't plan to actually view any events, but I thought I might find information about Tara or evidence I could take to the authorities. On Friday night, I used the Tor browser and the authentication codes to log into the observatory site. The interface was surprisingly professional, like a high-end video conferencing platform. There was a main viewing area currently showing a countdown timer with about 20 minutes remaining. Below that was a chat box where members were already discussing the upcoming event. To the right was a list of about 30 users currently online, all with anonymous handles. I didn't interact, just observed. As I watched, I noticed something disturbing. The users were discussing the subject for tonight's event, referring to them by a code name. They mentioned specific details about this person, their occupation, their habits, even their taste in music. The way they talked was clinical, almost bored, like executives discussing a business proposal. That's when a private message popped up on my screen. Someone with the username producer_3 had noticed me. The message asked if I was enjoying my first visit and whether I had received a personal invitation. They noted that my account was registered to someone else, someone who was no longer with their organization. They wanted to know how I had gained access. I didn't respond, but my heart was racing. They knew I wasn't supposed to be there. I was about to log off when another message came through. This one included my real name and address in Brixton. They said they had tracked my connection, impossible through Tor, but maybe they had other ways of monitoring access to the site. They said they knew I had Tara's drive and that I had watched the verification video. They said a car was already on its way to my flat. I shut everything down and left the library immediately. I didn't go home. I went to a hotel in King's Cross and paid cash for the room. That night, I saw on the local news that there had been a gas leak in my building. The residents had been evacuated while authorities investigated. There was footage of people standing outside in their pajamas, looking confused. I recognized my neighbors. The next morning, I withdrew as much cash as I could from my accounts, bought a prepaid phone, and got on a train to Manchester. From there, I kept moving, staying in cheap B&Bs, changing my appearance, using only cash. I've been moving ever since. I never went to the police. After seeing what happened at my flat, I'm convinced they have connections in law enforcement. These aren't amateurs. The site had too many users, too much money flowing through it. This is an organized operation with resources. Sometimes I think about the people in those videos. Were they random victims or chosen for specific reasons? Were they people who discovered something they shouldn't have, like me? Or were they selected based on those detailed profiles the members discussed, targeted specifically for someone's entertainment? I keep wondering about Tara. Was she a victim? Was she involved? Did she try to expose them and pay the price? Or did she try to profit from it somehow? I'll probably never know. I've changed hotels again today. The cleaning lady gave me a strange look this morning, like she recognized me. It might have been nothing, but I can't take chances. I'll dye my hair again tonight, maybe change my style completely. Last week, I saw a missing person flyer at a train station. It was for a man in his 30s, last seen leaving his office in Birmingham. The flyer said he worked as a cybersecurity consultant and had no history of disappearing. Something about his occupation made my stomach turn. Had he stumbled onto the same thing I had? I know they're still looking for me. I'm not important enough for them to spend significant resources on tracking down. But I've seen how their operation works. They're methodical, patient. They have money and connections, and they can't afford loose ends. Sometimes I consider turning myself in, going to the National Crime Agency rather than local police. But what proof do I have now? The thumb drive is hidden, hundreds of miles away. I have no evidence, just a story that sounds impossible. So I keep moving, keep looking over my shoulder. I've become good at spotting details, cars that linger too long, people whose eyes follow me in corner shops. I pay attention to emergency exits and back doors wherever I go. I've learned to live with less sleep. The hardest part is the isolation. I can't contact family or friends, can't use social media, can't stay in one place long enough to make connections. Some days the loneliness is worse than the fear. I don't know how long I can keep living like this. Maybe one day they'll decide I'm not worth the trouble and stop looking. Maybe I'll find a way to disappear completely, get a new identity, start over, somewhere far away. Or maybe they'll find me, and I'll become just another missing person, another name on a flyer that people glance at and forget. What haunts me most isn't the fear of being caught. It's knowing that right now, even as I write this, another event might be starting, another countdown timer reaching 0, another group of bored, wealthy viewers logging in from around the world, another person who has no idea they've been chosen. And no one would believe it's real, even if I told them. That's the perfect cover. Something so terrible most people dismiss it as an urban legend or creepypasta. Something that could never actually happen in the real world. I never meant to find it. That's important to understand. I was just a bored software developer working from my flat in Manchester, running tests on a new algorithm designed to filter illegal content from social media platforms. It was a contract job for a mid-sized tech company. Good money, flexible hours, and the sort of work that looks impressive on a CV. The kind of opportunity you don't question too deeply. My algorithm was supposed to identify and flag videos containing violence, abuse, or other prohibited content before they could be uploaded. Nothing revolutionary, just an improvement on existing systems. I needed sample data to test it, so the company gave me access to a secure server containing thousands of videos that had been previously removed from their platform. Most were exactly what you'd expect: fights, animal cruelty, dangerous stunts gone wrong. The algorithm handled these easily, assigning risk scores with over 95% accuracy compared to human moderators. But there were outliers, videos that humans had flagged, but my system missed entirely. These were the ones I needed to focus on to improve the detection rates. One particular video kept slipping through. The file name was just a string of numbers and letters, and according to the metadata, 6 different human moderators had flagged it for immediate removal, each citing different reasons. When I finally reviewed it myself, I was confused. It showed an empty room with white walls, a concrete floor, and a single metal chair in the center. Nothing happened for nearly 3 minutes. No people, no movement, just static footage of an empty room. The video quality was poor, with occasional digital artifacts, compression issues most likely. I ran it through the algorithm again with different parameters, but it consistently received a low-risk score. I noted this as an anomaly and moved on to other samples. But that night, lying in bed, I kept thinking about it. Why had 6 moderators independently flagged an empty room? What were they seeing that both I and my algorithm had missed? The next morning, I downloaded the video file and examined it more carefully. The metadata contained an unusual string in the creator field. What looked like an onion address, the kind used on Tor networks. Out of professional curiosity, I accessed Tor through a secure virtual machine and entered the address. It led to a black screen with a simple login form and a counter displaying 4,291. As I watched, The number increased to 4,292. The site offered no explanation of what this counter represented. No context, no identifying information, just a login form and that steadily increasing number. I closed the browser and returned to my work. I had deadlines to meet, and mysterious websites weren't relevant to improving my algorithm. I modified the code to better detect empty rooms with strange metadata and moved on to other test cases. 3 days later, I received an email from an address consisting of random characters. The subject line was the same string of numbers and letters as the video file name. The body contained only a username and password, followed by the words, "Observer access granted." I should have deleted it immediately, should have reported it to the company's security team. Instead, I saved the information and continued working as if nothing had happened. That night, after a few glasses of wine, I reopened my secure virtual machine, accessed the .onion address, and entered the credentials. The site loaded to show the same empty room from the video, but now as a live feed. The counter in the corner showed 7,843. A chat window occupied the right side of the screen, messages scrolling by too quickly to read properly. From what I could gather, users were discussing preparations for something called an event. Some were placing what appeared to be bets using cryptocurrency. In the bottom left corner was a countdown timer. 47 hours, 12 minutes, and 36 seconds. Just under 3 days. I watched for about 20 minutes. Nothing changed in the room. The chat continued with discussions I couldn't fully follow, filled with abbreviations and terminology I didn't recognize. I logged out, shut down the virtual machine, and tried to forget about it. The next day, I received another email from a different random address. This one contained only a postcode, my postcode, and the message, confirmation required for observer status. I immediately strengthened all my security settings, changed passwords, and ran multiple malware scans. Everything came back clean. I convinced myself it was just a coincidence or a scare tactic used by whatever strange corner of the internet I'd stumbled into. Still, I deleted the virtual machine and resolved to focus solely on my work. That evening, my doorbell rang. When I checked through the peephole, no one was there. But on the ground was a small package wrapped in brown paper with no postage or shipping labels. Inside was a cheap mobile phone, switched off, with a handwritten note containing just a time, 2000 hours. Against my better judgment, I turned on the phone at the specified time. It immediately connected to a network I didn't recognize and opened to a video feed. The same room, the same angle, but now the chair was occupied. A person sat there, head covered by a black hood, hands secured behind their back. The counter now showed 12,574 and was increasing rapidly. The chat window was moving so fast it was just a blur of text. The countdown timer read 0031 minutes 8 seconds, 31 minutes. I wanted to turn it off, to throw the phone away, but I couldn't look away. I told myself I needed to know what this was, what I had inadvertently become involved with. At exactly 20:30, a figure entered the frame wearing a featureless white mask and surgical gloves. They carried a small tray of implements I couldn't clearly identify. The masked figure approached the bound person and held up what looked like a scalpel to the camera. The chat suddenly slowed, and a message appeared in red. Bidding begins. Choose location. I switched off the phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I understood now what I had found, what the algorithm had failed to detect, what those 6 human moderators had recognized from experience. The empty room wasn't just an empty room. It was a stage being set. I spent the night researching red rooms, supposedly live-stream torture or murder that viewers could pay to watch or even direct. Most credible sources insisted they were urban myths, technically impossible to stream securely. But what if the conventional wisdom was wrong? What if someone had found a way to make it work? I needed to report this to the authorities, but I had a problem. I had accessed the site. I had watched. My digital fingerprints were all over this, and I had no way to prove I had stumbled onto it innocently. I decided to gather more evidence before coming forward. The next day, I returned to work and began examining other videos that had slipped past my algorithm, but been flagged by human moderators. There were 5 more showing empty rooms, each with different layouts, but similar empty chairs. Each file contained hidden .onion addresses in the metadata. That evening, another package arrived at my door. This one contained a USB drive. When I checked it on a secure system, it contained a single video file. It showed the complete event from the previous night. I couldn't watch more than a few seconds before shutting it down. But in those seconds, I saw enough to know this was real. These weren't actors. This wasn't simulated. And according to the counter, over 15,000 people had watched it happen. I decided to go to the police the next morning. I would turn over everything I had found and face whatever consequences came with it. I spent the night copying evidence to an external drive and writing a detailed account of how I had discovered the site. I woke to the sound of an email notification. The subject line was "Observer status revoked." The body contained my full name, address, and a photograph of me sleeping in my bed, taken from inside my flat, hours earlier. Below the photo was a message: "Participant status pending. Current bids, 18 inches. I left immediately with just my wallet and phone, checked into a hotel on the other side of the city using cash, spent the day moving between public places, trying to figure out what to do. That evening, I returned to the hotel to find the door to my room slightly ajar. Inside, everything appeared untouched except for the television, which was turned onto a blank screen with a counter, 23,109. I packed up again and left, taking a night bus to Leeds, found another hotel, tried to sleep, woke to find my new room's mirror had fogged up despite no one using the shower. Written in the condensation was a set of coordinates and a time, 2 days from now. I looked up the coordinates. They pointed to an abandoned factory on the outskirts of Birmingham. I've been moving constantly since then, different cities, different hotels, always paying cash. I've disposed of my original phone, bought and discarded several burners. Each time I think I've broken the pattern, I find evidence they found me. A note slipped under a door, a message written on a receipt, a counter displayed on a digital screen as I walk past. The most terrifying part is not knowing how they keep finding me, or who they even are. Is it one person? A group? Is it the thousands of observers, some percentage of whom are actively tracking me? I've examined my clothing for tracking devices, checked for implants under my skin, scanned for rogue wireless signals. Nothing. 3 hours ago, I received a text on my newest phone, one that no one should have the number for. Final preparations underway. Broadcast begins 2100. Viewer count 41,863. I'm writing this in a library in Glasgow using a public computer. I've been on trains, buses and taxis continuously for the past 48 hours. I haven't slept, barely eaten. I'm running out of cash, options and places to hide. I've come to a terrible realization. What I discovered wasn't just a red room. It was an entire ecosystem built around them. My algorithm wasn't failing to detect prohibited content. It was being trained to deliberately ignore it. The company that hired me wasn't trying to remove this content. They were developing sophisticated methods to hide it in plain sight. The contract job, the test videos, the access to the secure server, it was all a setup. They weren't assessing the algorithm's ability to detect prohibited content. They were assessing me, my reaction, my moral flexibility, my potential as either an asset to their operation or a threat to be eliminated. And I failed their test by showing too much curiosity, by looking too closely at what I was meant to overlook. The most disturbing part is how vast this network must be. The resources required to track someone across multiple cities, to always be one step ahead, to have eyes everywhere. It suggests organization and reach that goes beyond what any ordinary criminal enterprise should be capable of. I wonder how many other programmers, content moderators, and data analysts have been pulled into this system. How many recognized what I failed to see and chose to look the other way? How many became observers rather than raising alarms? How many are watching now? I have less than 6 hours until the scheduled broadcast. The counter likely shows over 50,000 by now. 50,000 people waiting to watch what happens to me. I've considered turning myself in to the police, but what if some of them are connected to this network? The level of coordination I've witnessed suggests infiltration of normal systems. Who can I trust? I keep thinking about those other empty rooms I found in the test videos. How many people have sat in those chairs? How many more will follow? And was I selected randomly? Or is there something specific about me that made them choose me as the next subject? I don't know if anyone will believe this account. It sounds paranoid, even to me as I write it. But I know what I've seen. I know what's hunting me. I'm going to post this and then head to the train station. I have a plan to get to a remote village in the Scottish Highlands where a former colleague has a holiday cottage. No internet, no mobile service. Maybe if I can stay off the grid long enough, they'll select another target, move on to someone else. That's the final horror of this system. The knowledge that my only hope for survival may be that someone else takes my place in that chair, that the observer's attention shifts to another victim, that the algorithm selects a new participant. The idea makes me sick, but I'm out of alternatives. If you're reading this and you work in content moderation, data filtering, or AI development, pay attention to what your systems are being trained to ignore. Look closer at the empty rooms. Ask questions about the files everyone seems to overlook. And if you ever receive an email offering observer status, delete it immediately. Don't let curiosity lead you where it led me. The broadcast is scheduled for 2100 hours tonight. I have no intention of being in front of a camera. But as I've learned over these past terrible days, my intentions may no longer matter. I started working from home last January. The transition wasn't difficult. My job as a data analyst for a health insurance company translated well to remote work. Just me, my laptop, and endless spreadsheets tracking claim patterns and cost projections. The company sent us home with monitors, docking stations, and even ergonomic chairs. They wanted to make sure our productivity wouldn't suffer during the isolation. My apartment wasn't ideal for a home office. 1 bedroom, thin walls, and neighbors who seemed determined to renovate during business hours. I converted half my living room into a workspace, setting up near the window for natural light. The arrangement worked well enough for the first few months. My internet connection was reliable, my work routine established, my performance reviews positive. In April, I started having connection issues. Video calls would freeze, downloads would stall. Websites that had loaded instantly now took ages to appear. At first, I blamed my service provider. They were notorious for throttling speeds during peak hours. But after several technician visits and modem replacements, the problems persisted. Strangely, the issues seemed most pronounced between midnight and 4 a.m., when I wasn't even using the internet. I started monitoring my network traffic using software recommended by our IT department. The data showed massive bandwidth consumption during those early morning hours, despite all my devices supposedly being in sleep mode. Something was using my connection and using it heavily. My first thought was a neighbor had somehow accessed my network. I changed my Wi-Fi password, enabled additional security features, and installed a VPN. The mysterious usage continued. Next, I suspected malware. Perhaps my laptop had been compromised and was part of some botnet. I ran every scanning tool available, finding nothing unusual. The IT team remotely inspected my work laptop and pronounced it clean. The mystery bothered me enough that I began staying up late, watching the network monitor in real time, trying to identify which device was responsible. My sleep suffered. Dark circles formed under my eyes. My work performance began to decline. Colleagues commented on my appearance during video calls. I started keeping the camera off. One night in May, around 1 a.m., I caught it happening. The network monitor showed active data transfer, nearly maxing out my bandwidth. The source was a device listed only as media server, something I didn't recognize and certainly hadn't set up. I immediately logged into my router's admin panel to block the device, but when I refreshed the connected devices list, media server had disappeared. The next day, I contacted my building's management company about the internet issues. The maintenance supervisor suggested I might be picking up interference from other apartments and recommended positioning my router away from shared walls. When I mentioned the mysterious device, he seemed uninterested, attributing it to a neighbor's smart TV or gaming system, briefly connecting to the wrong network. That explanation didn't satisfy me. I ordered a new router with advanced security features, setting it up to log all connection attempts and data usage by device. That night, I stayed up again, watching the logs in real time. At precisely 1:17 a.m., media server appeared again, beginning its huge data transfers. This time, I managed to capture its MAC address before it disappeared, a unique identifier that should help track down the physical device. The next morning, I contacted a friend who works in cybersecurity. He couldn't identify the manufacturer from the MAC address. It seemed to be using a randomized identifier that changed with each connection. This was sophisticated behavior, not typical of consumer electronics accidentally connecting to the wrong network. When I shared the timing pattern and bandwidth usage, he grew concerned. The behavior matched what he called data mules, compromised networks used to transmit large encrypted files during low traffic hours. My friend warned me that my network might be being used for transferring illegal content, anything from stolen financial data to more disturbing materials. He recommended I contact my internet service provider and possibly law enforcement. The thought that my connection might be facilitating something illegal made me deeply uncomfortable. Before taking that step, I decided to gather more information. I set up additional monitoring software that could track not just the amount of data, but also attempt to identify the type of traffic and its destination. The results were puzzling. The data wasn't being sent to multiple destinations as would be expected with botnet activity. Instead, it was a sustained connection to a single endpoint, using encrypted protocols that masked the content The destination IP address changed nightly, but always pointed to servers using Tor exit nodes, the infrastructure of the so-called dark web. My friend confirmed this was consistent with someone using my network as a relay for accessing hidden services, potentially to mask their own identity. The question remained, who was doing this and how had they gained access? I became obsessed with finding answers. I started logging every electronic device in my apartment, not just computers and phones, but the smart TV, digital thermostat, even the refrigerator with its internet connectivity feature. None matched the mysterious media server MAC address. I checked for hidden devices, looking behind furniture, inside vents, examining the electrical outlets for suspicious adapters. Nothing. In June, after 6 weeks of disrupted sleep and growing anxiety, I made a breakthrough. The mystery device only connected when I was home. On nights I stayed at a friend's place or worked late at a coffee shop. My network log showed no unusual activity. The implication was unsettling. Whatever was happening was somehow tied to my presence. That night, I conducted an experiment. I left all my devices powered on as usual, but shut off the bedroom and bathroom lights, creating the impression I had gone to sleep. Then I sat in darkness near my router, a network analyzer running silently on my laptop. At 1:14 a.m., I heard a soft electronic tone from somewhere in my apartment, almost imperceptible, like the sound a device makes when powering on. 3 minutes later, media server appeared on my network. I tracked the signal strength, moving my laptop around the apartment to find where it was strongest. The source appeared to be my bedroom. I searched methodically, under the bed, in the closet, behind the dresser. Nothing. Then I noticed my work laptop, closed and apparently asleep on the nightstand. According to my monitoring software, it wasn't the source. But when I opened it, the screen remained dark while the power indicator showed it was running. I forced a shutdown and restarted it. Everything seemed normal. The company's security software showed no unauthorized access, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with the machine. I decided to work exclusively on my personal laptop for a few days, leaving the work device powered off and stored in a drawer. The mysterious bandwidth usage stopped immediately. 3 nights with no media server appearing on my network. On the 4th day, I received an email from IT asking why my work laptop hadn't connected to the company servers for scheduled updates. I explained I was having technical issues and was using my personal device temporarily. They insisted I reconnect the work laptop as soon as possible for security compliance. Reluctantly, I took the laptop from the drawer and powered it on. Everything appeared normal. Same login screen, same desktop configuration, same applications. But that night, media server reappeared on my network at exactly 1:17 a.m. I was now convinced the work laptop contained something it shouldn't. I contacted IT again, more explicitly describing my concerns. They seemed dismissive, suggesting I was misinterpreting normal corporate security measures that run in the background. When I pressed further, mentioning the dark web connections, their tone changed. They said they would send a replacement laptop immediately and asked me to return my current one directly to their security team, rather than through the normal equipment channels. The replacement arrived the next day via courier. The security team requested I not power on the old laptop again and pack it in the provided shielded bag. Their sudden urgency only heightened my suspicion. That night, with the old laptop unplugged and sealed in the shielded bag, my network remained quiet. No unusual connections, no bandwidth spikes. In July, a month after returning the laptop, I received a call from someone identifying themselves as part of the company's external security audit team. They asked detailed questions about my work habits, when I typically logged in, how often I used the company VPN, whether I ever observed unusual behavior from the laptop. They seemed particularly interested in whether I used the machine during off hours or if it remained powered on overnight. I answered honestly, then asked why they were investigating. The auditor explained they were conducting routine security checks on all remote workers. The explanation seemed reasonable, but something in their tone felt rehearsed. A week later, I was called into a virtual meeting with HR and my department head. They explained that due to restructuring, my position was being eliminated. They offered a generous severance package in exchange for signing a confidentiality agreement covering not just company data, but also any observations about company equipment or security practices. The implication was clear. Take the money, stay quiet, move on. I signed the agreement. The severance would cover my expenses while I looked for new work. But I couldn't stop thinking about what had been happening. What had been on that laptop? What kind of data was being transmitted through my network in those early morning hours? My cybersecurity friend suggested a theory. The laptop had been compromised, not by an outside threat, but by someone inside the company. Perhaps someone in IT or security was using employee devices as relays for accessing dark web services, counting on the company's VPN and security software to mask their activities. The fact that the usage occurred only when I was home suggested the laptop might have been monitoring my presence, perhaps through the microphone detecting ambient noise or the webcam sensing light changes, to determine when it was safe to activate. In August, I found a new job with a different company. Remote work again, but this time I established strict boundaries. No equipment stays powered on after hours. Nothing connects to my home network without thorough vetting. I invested in a network firewall that logs and blocks suspicious activities. I should have felt secure again. I didn't. Last week, I received an anonymous email. The subject line contained only a timestamp, 1:17 a.m. The body was empty. I deleted it immediately and ran security scans on all my devices. Nothing unusual was detected. 3 days ago, while reviewing my new home security system footage, I noticed something strange. At exactly 1:17 a.m., the camera in my home office briefly lost connection, just for a few seconds, but long enough to create a gap in the recording. The system logs showed no errors, no power fluctuations, no explanation for the interruption. Yesterday, I received a package. No return address, no shipping label, no indication of how it had arrived at my door. Inside was a laptop, not a brand I recognized, with no manufacturer markings of any kind. Just a plain black case with a power button that emitted a soft blue glow. I haven't opened it, haven't connected it to power. It sits in my closet now, inside 3 layers of signal blocking material. I haven't told anyone about the package, haven't reported it to the police. Something tells me it wouldn't make a difference. Something tells me this isn't about me specifically. I'm just a node in a network, a convenient relay point for information traveling between unseen parties. Sometimes at night, I wake suddenly at 1:16 a.m., 1 minute before whatever this is activates. I lie in bed, listening to the silence of my apartment, waiting for that soft electronic tone I heard months ago. Sometimes I think I hear it, just at the edge of perception. Sometimes I convince myself it's just imagination. But the other night, I checked my network logs out of habit. At exactly 1:17 a.m. for precisely 3 minutes, an unknown device had connected to my network. The identifier was different this time. Not media server, but observer client. The data transfer was minimal. Just a few kilobytes. Just enough to send a message. I'm still here. I'm still watching. I'm writing this now as a warning, though I'm not entirely sure what I'm warning against. Corporate espionage, government surveillance, organized criminal networks. The boundary between these possibilities seems increasingly blurred. All I know with certainty is that our digital lives are not as private as we imagine. Our networks not as secure as we're led to believe. Something moves through the infrastructure we've built, using our connections, our devices, our homes as waypoints in a journey we can't see or understand. And sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet, it pauses briefly at your address before continuing on its way. I moved to Seoul 3 years ago to teach English at a private academy. The transition from my small Midwestern hometown to one of the most technologically advanced cities in the world was jarring in ways I hadn't anticipated. The crowded subway stations, the constant digital advertisements on every surface, the blinding speed of the internet, all of it overwhelmed me initially. But humans adapt. After 6 months, I barely noticed these things anymore. What I did notice was my growing sense of isolation. Despite being surrounded by millions of people, my limited Korean and cultural differences created invisible barriers. Most of my social interactions were with other foreign teachers who came and went as their contracts ended. The few Korean friends I made were busy with demanding jobs and family obligations. Gradually, my world narrowed to my small apartment, the academy where I taught, and the convenience store on the corner. I'm telling you this to explain why I spend so much time online. In a city where I often felt invisible, the internet offered connection. I joined forums for expatriates, video chatted with family back home, and participated in online gaming communities. My laptop became my primary window to human interaction beyond the superficial conversations at work. My apartment came with the fastest internet connection I'd ever experienced, a common feature in Seoul, where digital infrastructure is prioritized. Downloads that would have taken hours back home completed in seconds. Video calls never lagged. Streaming was instantaneous. This remarkable connectivity became something I took for granted until the night it inexplicably faltered. It started with minor disruptions, buffering videos, delayed messages, dropped calls. Frustrating but not unusual, even in Seoul. I ran speed tests showing significantly reduced bandwidth. Thinking it might be a building-wide issue, I messaged my neighbor, another English teacher, who often helped me navigate these small annoyances of expatriate life. He reported no problems with his connection. I contacted my internet provider, navigating their automated customer service system with my limited Korean. After several redirections, I received a message that a technician would check the external connections to my building the following day. Until then, I would have to manage with the degraded service. That night, trying to video chat with my sister, the connection became so poor that her image froze repeatedly, her voice cutting in and out until we gave up. After ending the failed call, I noticed something odd. Despite the video call being disconnected, my laptop's network activity indicator showed continuous data transfer, uploading and downloading at significant rates. I opened my network monitoring application, something I rarely used but had installed months earlier when troubleshooting a different issue. The interface displayed active connections between my device and multiple unfamiliar IP addresses. Data was flowing through ports I hadn't authorized. My first thought was malware. Perhaps I'd clicked something I shouldn't have, and now my computer was part of some botnet. I initiated security scans, closed all applications, and even physically disconnected from the internet by unplugging my router. The network activity indicator went dark, as expected. I reconnected and immediately observed the unauthorized data transfer resuming. The security scans found nothing suspicious. The next day, the internet technician arrived while I was at work. When I returned home that evening, I found a note in broken English explaining that no issues had been detected with the external connection. The technician had reset my router and suggested the problem might be with my laptop. The note included standard recommendations: restart the device, clear the cache, check for system updates. I followed these instructions, even performing a system restore to a point weeks earlier. The unauthorized network activity continued. What changed was my internet speed, no longer degraded, but functioning at its usual remarkable pace, despite the mysterious data transfers happening in the background. That night, I received a message from a username I didn't recognize on a messaging platform I rarely used. The message contained only a link, no text. Normally, I would never click such a thing, but exhaustion and frustration had worn down my usual caution. The link led to what appeared to be a troubleshooting forum in Korean. Using a browser translation tool, I could make out technical discussions about network routing, VPN configurations, and bandwidth allocation. One thread caught my attention, a conversation about something called passive nodes in residential networks. The translation was imperfect, but I gathered that certain high-speed connections in densely populated areas could be utilized as relay points for data transmission without the user's knowledge. The thread described this as a common practice among certain online communities requiring anonymized traffic. As I scrolled through the discussion, a private message appeared from a forum user with the name Node Manager. Translated, the message asked if I was experiencing connectivity issues and offered assistance. I hesitantly explained my situation: the unexplained data transfers, the initial speed degradation, the failed troubleshooting attempts. The response came quickly, explaining that my internet connection had likely been incorporated into a private routing network without my authorization. The initial slowdown occurred during the integration process, but now that my connection was fully configured as a node, the system was allocating resources more efficiently, allowing both normal usage and background data relay. I asked what kind of data was being transmitted through my connection. The response was vague. Secure communications requiring privacy protection, nothing illegal, nothing that would be traced back to me. When I expressed concern about having my network used without consent, Node Manager offered to remove my connection from their system for a fee in cryptocurrency. This had all the hallmarks of a scam, but the technical details matched exactly what I was experiencing. I declined the payment option and stated my intention to report this to my internet provider and local authorities. The final message I received contained just 2 words in English: watch first. A moment later, a link appeared. Against every instinct of self-preservation, I clicked it. The page that loaded had a minimal interface: a black background, a video player in the center, a timestamp, and a view account showing 17. The video showed an empty room with white walls. The timestamp indicated the feed was live. For several minutes, nothing happened. I was about to close the browser when a person entered the frame. Their face was obscured by digital pixelation, but their body language suggested nervousness. They sat in a chair facing the camera and held up a piece of paper with writing I couldn't read from the angle shown. The viewer count increased to 23. A small text field appeared below the video, showing messages in various languages. Using translation tools, I could see viewers asking for the subject to perform specific actions. Most requests were simple: raise a hand, stand up, turn around. The person complied with each instruction, movements becoming increasingly reluctant as the request continued. I closed the browser, deeply disturbed by whatever I had witnessed. Within seconds, my messenger pinged with another message from Node Manager. An image of my face, captured moments earlier through my laptop's webcam, which I had never activated. Below the image was text explaining that my network node was being used to route encrypted streams for a private viewing community. Attempting to interfere would result in my transition from relay point to content subject. I shut down my laptop immediately, unplugged all devices, and spent a sleepless night contemplating my options. The next morning, I purchased a new laptop and a mobile hotspot from a provider different from my home internet service. Using this completely separate connection, I researched what I had stumbled into. Information was sparse and contradictory. Some sources dismissed red rooms as urban legends, technically impossible due to bandwidth limitations of anonymized networks. Others suggested they existed, but were elaborate scams. Staged performances marketed as authentic to separate cryptocurrency from gullible viewers. A few troubling accounts described them as genuine operations run by technically sophisticated criminal networks exploiting high-speed infrastructure in countries with advanced digital ecosystems. South Korea, with its extraordinary connectivity and dense urban population, appeared repeatedly in these discussions. The country's internet speeds, among the fastest globally, made it ideal for services requiring substantial bandwidth. Its urban density meant residential connections could be compromised without drawing attention, lost in the digital noise of millions of concurrent users. I considered reporting my experience to authorities but hesitated. My visa status made me reluctant to draw official attention. My limited Korean would make explaining the technical nuances difficult. Most importantly, I had no evidence beyond the messages on my compromised laptop, which I was now afraid to access again. Instead, I contacted a cybersecurity consultant recommended in an expatriate forum. We met in a busy cafe where I explained the situation. His expression remained neutral throughout my account, but his questions became increasingly specific about the interface I had seen, the routing methods described, and the patterns of data transfer. After I finished, he explained that what I had encountered was unfortunately real. Certain buildings in Seoul, particularly those with direct connections to the city's advanced fiber infrastructure, were specifically targeted for integration into these networks. Foreign residents were preferred targets, less likely to report issues, more likely to attribute problems to cultural or language misunderstandings, often living alone with fewer people to notice strange digital occurrences. The consultant offered to secure my new devices and investigate my home network for a substantial fee. Desperate for help, I agreed. 2 days later, he came to my apartment, bringing specialized equipment to analyze the connection without directly engaging with it. His examination confirmed what Node Manager had claimed. My internet service had been configured as a relay node for encrypted streams, with a secondary function allowing remote access to connected devices. The modification was sophisticated, operating at the router firmware level. Simply replacing the router wouldn't solve the problem, as the access point in the building's telecommunications closet had also been compromised. Moving to a different provider wouldn't help either, as most used the same physical infrastructure in this area. The consultant implemented temporary security measures, a hardware firewall, encrypted DNS services, VPN protocols, while acknowledging these were bandages on a more fundamental problem. His recommendation was blunt: move to a different building as soon as possible. Until then, assume all connected devices were potentially compromised. I began searching for a new apartment immediately, but lease terms in Seoul are complicated, typically requiring substantial deposits and minimum stay periods. Breaking my current contract would mean losing thousands of dollars I couldn't afford to forfeit. A week after implementing the security measures, I received a paper letter in my mailbox, unusual in itself, as most communications in Seoul are digital. The letter contained a printed screenshot of my new laptop's desktop, taken the previous day, along with a list of websites I had visited while researching new apartments. The message was clear: the security measures had failed or been circumvented. That night, my apartment lost power briefly, just a few seconds, but long enough to reset all electronic devices. When service resumed, the hardware firewall the consultant had installed showed its configuration had been reset to default settings. The VPN connection had disconnected. The specialized DNS settings had reverted. I contacted the consultant again, who seemed genuinely disturbed by this development. The level of access required to coordinate a targeted power interruption with immediate reconfiguration of security devices suggested resources beyond typical hackers. He advised me to leave the apartment immediately, even if it meant financial loss. I spent that night in a hotel, using only my mobile phone with a new SIM card purchased with cash. In the morning, I returned to my apartment to pack essential items, planning to stay with a colleague until finding new housing. As I entered, my phone received a notification despite being disconnected from Wi-Fi and using the new SIM. The message contained my current location coordinates and the simple text, "Node status remains active." I packed quickly, taking only what would fit in a backpack. As I was leaving, my neighbor, the one who had reported no internet issues, was entering his apartment. He nodded in greeting, then paused, looking at my backpack. He asked in perfect English if I was going somewhere. When I vaguely mentioned visiting a friend, he smiled and said perhaps my internet issues would be resolved when I returned. Something in his expression made me deeply uncomfortable. I mumbled a response and hurried away, but not before noticing a small pin on his lapel, a design I recognized from the forum, where I had first encountered discussions of passive nodes. The icon resembled a stylized eye with a digital motif. I never returned to that apartment. I forfeited my deposit, left most of my possessions, and moved to a different district of Seoul. I changed jobs, altered my online presence, and replaced all electronic devices. For several months, I detected no unusual network activities or unexplained communications. Then yesterday, while using a public Wi-Fi connection at a cafe I'd never previously visited, I received an email to an address I had created only weeks earlier and shared with no one. The message contained a single image, a screenshot of the coffee shop's security camera feed showing me sitting at my current table, captured moments earlier. Below was a view account, 31. I don't know if I'll ever escape this network. It exists in the infrastructure itself, in the invisible digital pathways we've woven through our modern world. Sometimes I wonder how many others are unknowingly serving as nodes, their connections becoming conduits for streams they'll never see, their cameras capturing moments they don't know are being shared. The internet has no memory limitations, no capacity for mercy, no mechanism for true deletion. Somewhere in that vast digital architecture, everything is preserved, including, I suspect, whatever they recorded through my devices during those weeks. I've become content in a library I can't access, viewed by people I'll never identify. What terrifies me most isn't that I'm still being watched. It's the possibility that I always was, that the entire digital ecosystem we've built is fundamentally, architecturally designed for observation, not by governments or corporations, but by whoever has the technical skill to access its deeper functions. And in that shadow network, latency isn't just a measure of connection speed. It's the delay between becoming a node and realizing you've always been a subject.